everyone. Welcome. Oh, thank you. Welcome to the February 16th meeting of the school committee, and we're going to begin with our Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. We'll just take a moment to offer up opportunities for folks to declare that they are recording. If anyone in the hall is recording other than the town, please say so. Not seeing any. That brings us to our public comment section. We have some members in the hall with us tonight, but I believe everyone is here to speak on some of the topics on the agenda. We'll bring you up when we get to those topics. But if there are other public comments, we welcome them now. And not seeing any. That brings us to our student representative report and Angelina.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. To begin, on Friday, January 27th, Murdoch High School Student Council hosted the Kickoff Special Olympics Bocce Tournament. The first of 3 MASC and SOMA events that weekend, our tournament was attended by 10 area schools and over 120 people. A great time was had by all participants. I want to thank Chief Walski and Officer Maynard from the Winchendon Police Department, Officer Solo from the Ashburnham Police Department, Vice Principal Mr. Sachoka, teachers, staff, and students, parents who were capable of making this event a success. The middle high school performance of Matilda the Musical was also a great success. Held on February 3rd and 4th, we had the opportunity to witness the incredible talent that the Murdoch's theater department has to offer. Our theater program is saying goodbye to 8 of our senior performers, and they will be greatly missed. As a senior myself, I greatly encourage all middle and high school students to get involved with the musical when you have the chance. They've been some of the most memorable experiences that I've had at Murdoch. This afternoon, Murdoch High School held its first ever World Language Fair. Students from all novice and intermediate language classes were tasked with making posters containing details from different countries around the world. Visitors to the fair were given a bingo card with names of the countries and were tasked to go around the fair and find different fun facts about the countries listed. The students who filled their bingo cards were entered into a raffle and have the opportunity to win a Dunkin' Donuts gift card donated by the Student Council. Winners will be announced tomorrow morning. Tomorrow night, the middle school is hosting a dance for 7th and 8th graders. Tickets are $5 in advance and are being sold at lunch. No tickets will be sold at the door. Pizza, snacks, and drinks will be for sale. Tomorrow in the middle school, it is pajama or comfy clothes day. The Murdoch High School Little Caesars fundraiser order will be delivered on February 28th. A parent square notice will be sent with the details when they're available. Murdoch High School Student Council will be taking the polar plunge for Special Olympics on March 8th at Craigville Beach in Hyannis during the annual conference. Donations can be made to the team at fundraise.specialolympicsma.org. Search for Murdoch High School or contact Ms. Rondeau at the high school. Murdoch senior Tiana Grassell will be performing at the Massachusetts Music Educators Association 2023 All-State Festival at Boston Symphony Hall on Saturday, March 4th at 1 p.m. Of the 106 sopranos who auditioned, Tiana placed in the top 25% to earn her position at the All-State Festival. Tickets are available for purchase beginning February 14th through the Symphony Hall box office or by calling 1-888-266-1200. A fan van is available to students who want to attend the concert. Please see Ms. Rondeau for details. February break is the 20th through the 24th. Murdoch Middle School is holding help sessions during February break on Tuesday through Thursday from 9 to 12. Please contact the middle school office for registration. Are you looking for fun activities to do over February break? The Youth Changemaker Sunshine Cafe has just opened and we're hosting a series of events over February break for the youth in town. In the morning, on Tuesday the 21st through Friday the 25th, we will be having arts and crafts for kids aged kindergarten and above from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We will have snacks and drinks provided for free. For our Winchendon teenagers, we will have several events lined up in the evenings from 6 to 8 p.m., including a paint and sip night this Saturday, a Lego board game night on Wednesday the 22nd, a Celtics game viewing party on the 23rd, open mic night on the 24th, and a cooking class on the 25th. All events are going to be held at the Winchendon CAC at 273 Central Street. The paint and sip night and cooking class do require registration, but all events are completely free to all. If you have any questions or are looking to register, please email me, Angelina Delasanta, at angelinadelasanta250@gmail.com. For Murdoch Sports, this evening, the indoor track team had their state meet at the Reggie Lewis Center in Boston. On Sunday, February 18th, there will be a boys varsity basketball game against Southbridge at 1 p.m. at Southbridge High School. That same Sunday, the 18th, there will also be a middle school cheerleading meet at King Philip High School in Brentham. Time is to be determined. And then finally, the Murdoch Sports Boosters are in desperate need of volunteers to work the concession stand at Murdoch middle and high school sporting events to help raise money for our student athletics. To volunteer, please contact Sue at 978-297-5671, text or call. And that concludes the report. Any questions?
Sure, that's all.
That's two meetings worth of information, so I'm glad to.
Mr. Chair,
Karen?
I was just going to say that the Matilda was awesome, and our own Angelina was fabulous. I'd also like to say that I was lucky enough to go by the Sunshine Cafe yesterday and saw quite a few of our Murdoch students, and they were making quite an impact on our community. And there were quite a few families and younger students running around and having fun. And if you go there, you cannot have the chocolate chip cookies because I want them all. They're really good, and the change makers made them. So they're all mine now.
Deal. Great report. Thank you, as always. All right, that brings us to our consent agenda. In your packet and emailed to you are the minutes from the January 5th meeting. If there are any questions or edits to the minutes, we can take that, and also happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Greg?
I'm assuming everybody had a chance to, maybe I shouldn't, had a chance to look over the minutes as they were sent to us previously, but I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes for January 5th, 2023.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, those in, we'll take a vote, a roll call vote. Greg Vine?
Aye.
And Larry?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. It is unanimous. The second item on our consent agenda tonight is a field trip approval. In your packet, you have some information about a trip to Ocean Park, Maine for Nature's Classroom. And if anyone is interested in speaking on this topic, we can certainly entertain that.
If you'd like. You're hard to deny. You're hard to deny.
I'm part of 9? What did you say?
You are hard to deny.
That's true.
Yes, I know.
Good evening, school committee. We're hoping to send our 5th grade students to Nature's Classroom. It's a residential outdoor education program that focuses on science, social and emotional learning, engineering skills, and team building. The lessons include standards-aligned and the programs, and each program's customized to support student learning in the classroom. There's hands-on lessons, and the focus is on building critical thinking skills and exploring the connections between the natural and human-made world. We're very excited to be able to bring this opportunity to our 5th graders. A lot of them have talked about how they haven't even really gone to many sleepovers, and they're excited for the opportunity to cross the state line with your permission to go into Maine. The facility is really amazing. It actually is the only Nature's Classroom that not only has the access to the ocean, but also some old forests and some ponds as well. So the kids will get a lot of unique experiences. And then ironically, they do take the ELA MCAS right after, so we're hoping that they'll have a lot of great experiences to reflect on, but no pressure. So the plan is to go from April 4th to the 7th with 103 fifth graders and 10 chaperones.
Mr. Chair,
Greg?
in hopes that this may inspire the next Rachel Carson, I would make a motion that we approve the field trip for the students to Maine.
I would second that.
All right, Karen seconds that Rachel Carson will come out of this trip. And do we have any discussion on Nature's Classroom? All right.
Mr. Chair, I just want to comment, Anna, that this is an incredible program. I took kids there when I was a middle school principal, and it was just a terrific experience, including, my favorite part was at the meals, they would collect a bucket, and if you didn't eat what was on your plate, it went into a bucket, and then they weighed the bucket to see how much. So during the week, your bucket was supposed to get smaller and smaller because you're becoming more responsible about your choices that you made. It was a great idea.
I believe
So-
you're discussing the ORT report, the ORT report?
Yes.
Yes, and yeah, that's exactly the whole point, is so kids become aware of what they consume and what they, they get encouraged to sort of try everything, but then not to overdo it.
Right.
Yeah, it's
So
great.
it was just little things like that all week long. There were just little things that you picked up on. It was a fabulous program, so I'm very happy that our students are getting the opportunity to go. Thank you for doing that.
No, I'm excited. I went as a child as well. I also went as a student teacher. It's a whole other thing when it's Nature's Classroom as a student teacher. It was definitely interesting, but I'm excited for the kids. I really think that it'll help bond them together as they're getting ready to go to the middle school, but then also to get some of that independence, but to really talk about things that we don't always get to go too deeply into, and how important it is for them to have positive relationships with each other. And it's so challenging. They get to have a lot of choice as well. So they'll get to choose from like an extended hike, or something to do with art, or like engineering. And one of the projects that they do that the kids are really excited about, because we had the people come to talk to the kids, and also the Nature's Classroom people came and spoke to the parents. And one of the things the kids are excited about is making outdoor furniture in the trees with existing things that they find in the woods. So it's really a great way to encourage kids to be outside and really enjoy each other. So,
All right, that's it. Thank you.
thank you.
Any other discussion on the field trip request? All right, we'll take a vote. Karen?
Aye.
And Larry?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. It is unanimous. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Larry?
I would like to make a motion that we take new business items 9A and 9B and move them up to our next order of business following the consent agenda that we just completed.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to move new business 9A and 9B up to our next item. Any discussion? Okay, those in favor, Karen?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that brings us to new business. The next item on our agenda is item 9A,
couldn't go through the
the
trifecta?
Community Preservation
ABC?
Act Exploratory Committee Discussion and Vote. Tonight, we have two members of the community with us, Adrian Guerrero and Amanda Phillips, who are here to present some information on the act, which I believe is a part of next month's warrant for the special town meeting. And so certainly welcome our guests and yield the floor to you.
Yes, it's actually the Article 5 warrant, I believe, that we'll be voting on at town meeting. So thank you, school committee, for allowing us to come speak to you. I just want to talk a little bit about what the Community Preservation Act is. It's a trust fund that is set up between a surcharge on people's homeowners tax and a match that can be up to 100% of those monies that's matched by Massachusetts, the state government will put a match in there as well. And it gets put into a trust fund, and it is voted on by the people of the town as to what happens to this money. Things are brought before the CPA board that will be created. It's not created yet. We're just the exploratory committee. But there'll be another board that's created if it is voted into action. And everything has to go before the town at a town meeting to be voted on. The monies are specifically directed by the town residents as to what it gets used for. We are proposing that it be a 3% tax surcharge on these tax monies, but there are several exemptions. There's an elderly exemption. The first $100,000 value of your home is not counted. There's also an income exemption, and in your packet that I gave you, I have the income guidelines on the last page, so you can see what that is. So those are the three main exemptions. And then there's also a chart in the packet that shows you, for instance, a $300,000 house valued, you would only be paying $80.40 a year. So it's not a lot of money, and when we work together, we can make a big impact on things that might not otherwise be funded through the government. So there's that. And then also, in your packet for reference, I had printed out what Templeton has adopted this. 194 of the 351 Massachusetts state cities and towns have adopted it. So 194 of 351 have adopted it. And then it shows how much money the town of Templeton has raised since 2008. So their taxes have done 2 million, a little bit above 2 million. And then the state has matched a little under 2 million, so they have a total of almost $4 million that they have accrued since 2008 and been able to use for it's only used for 4 things. It can be used for open space, historic preservation, recreation, and housing. So I think that the school committee would have a little input in the recreation portion. And Mr. Guerra will talk about some of the things this money has been used for in other towns.
Thank you. Yes, the off-color printout I gave you talks about a lot of the items that can be used for the funds based on recreational. There's areas, there's open space, historical, recreational, and housing. And each one of these areas, the committees, will get up to at least 10% of the money that we accumulate from the town and the matching funds from the state. If you look at the printout, it shows some of the items, and I targeted just what the school system during the recreational, some of the items that can be used, for the school or for, well, just pretty much anything. Some of the idea of like Air and Groton, they used the funds for a new outdoor track, turf on the football fields, refurbish the tennis courts, things like that, the funds that can be used for. I mean, if you look at the 3% with the $100,000 exemption, and with the, your property value for the average home here in Winchton is around $280,000, and it comes out to $73 a year, which comes out to roughly around $6 a month. We think that's we feel that this is a good investment for the town. Plus, it's, money that you're getting from the state. This is a good opportunity to take advantage of something like this. And it can do a lot for the community. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Greg?
I don't have any questions at this time. I had a chance at the tri-board meeting to see previous presentations by some folks that were involved in this as well. And you folks have spent the last 8 months doing a lot of work on putting this together. And the town had a chance to consider this at town meeting 7 or 8 years ago, I believe it was, and unfortunately, it was decided to pass over the article at that time, which I think, personally, I think was a mistake. And I think this is something that will help the town, but it will also assist nonprofits that are involved in this. I was at an event last night where the Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust was celebrating their efforts over a 22-year period to raise $3.5 million for land preservation and acquisition and other items. And some of the things that the Community Preservation Act would fund would include a little more active recreational work as opposed to the passive recreation that Mount Grace does with their trail work, although this would fund trails as well in the area. And obviously the schools would be interested, like you say, in recreation, but just as a member of the community, schools aren't, and again, just speaking for myself, they're not my only concern. I think this benefits the entire community. So I thank you for bringing this to the committee for its consideration, and I'll wait till we have more discussion before considering a motion on it, but
I do want to point out that and for the people watching at home, if you Google Community Preservation Coalition, you get to the Community Preservation Act website, and it's very interactive. You can say, oh, I want to see what's going on in Billerica, and you can pull that up, and it'll tell you how much money they got from it, how much they raised, how much was matched by the state. It'll tell you what projects they've spent it on. I myself over the weekend, I was in Salem, Mass, just walking around because there was an ice festival there, and we were walking on a street, and there was this old graveyard, and there was a big sign next to it said renovation funding by the Community Preservation Act. So there's so many things that this can be used for.
Other comments?
I just think this is Mr. Chair, this is a great opportunity for us as a town and a community, and both the town community and school community, that we should not pass up. I'm looking at all the things in this sheet here. I mean, Groton and Munson have really benefited quite a bit from the program, and then at the end, Templeton, Gilman Waite Park, Dwelly Farm Recreation, Stonebridge Pond Culvert Project. I mean, these are significant expenses that Templeton wouldn't be able to afford without this kind of program. So I think, no one wants to see the taxes go up. I understand that. I don't either, but the benefits are going to far outweigh the cost, and to get the state to match it, I mean, it's almost like you got to pinch yourself and say, is this really too good to be true? So I'm really excited about it, and I hope to help in any way I can to promote it. I think we got to get the votes for it. And I thank you for putting it all together and presenting it here tonight. Oh, one more question. Who decides where the money goes? I think that was the big question at the
Yeah.
tri-board. Who decides where the money goes? Do we know that?
So so it's divided up between the 4 areas. So there's 4 areas: open space, historic preservation, recreation, and housing. 10% of the fund has to go to each of those every year. And
Okay,
it's decided by, there's going to be a CPA committee that will entertain, there'll be applications that if you have an idea, you can put an application in front of the committee. The committee will go through the applications and decide which ones they want to focus on, and then those will be brought for a vote in front of town meeting. So this Article 5 is not voting on the CPA committee yet. It's just voting to get it on the ballot. So if you go to town meeting and you say yes, it doesn't mean that it's going through already. It just gives you the vote to get it onto the ballot.
okay.
So that needs to be
So,
understood as well.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Larry?
so the CPA, to be on that committee, is that an elected position, appointed position? How do you get on that committee, the CPA?
Well, there's going to be at least one member from each committee that's going to be on that CPC committee. And then there's going to be 4 extra openings. And I guess it's going to be elected from is it the 5 committee, other 5 committee
No, I thought it was going to be elected from the town.
from the town?
They have to go. So there's going to be 5 members. So one that will represent open space, one that will represent historic preservation, one that will represent recreation, and one that will represent housing. And then there's like a floater member there those are appointed by those places in town, like the Parks and Rec Committee
By
will
those
appoint somebody.
committees.
So those 5 are appointed, and then there are 4 elected members that can come from anybody in town, can run and be elected through a ballot, I believe. So it's
Okay.
going to be a mix.
There is the town meeting on the 13th of March that's going to be voting for this. So, we're trying to encourage everybody to come out to vote yes for this. It's very important.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
my question is, what does our vote do on this? Because I don't know that we need to necessarily vote on this, because I think this is more, yes, we can vote to support this here, but our vote won't, because we don't have anything on the warrant article. Oh, no, we have the budget, right? No, we don't have the budget yet.
So this item is before us, certainly for information.
Right.
The information has been shared, and we're thankful for that. We also have the prerogative as a board to vote to support the warrant article.
Right.
And if we choose to do so, we can vote to support or vote to not support, depending on the way members cast their votes. But it is truly only a vote of support, which would be announced at town meeting to support or not support the proposal in front of the town.
Right, because I know that usually when something like this is presented at the town meeting, it's usually like, the fiscal committee and the financial committee, and like voted 3-2, or the Board of Selectmen voted so-and-so. So, I'm just wondering, because we aren't technically part of that group that would normally be part of that.
We will be if we vote on this item.
Okay, I
Mr.
just-
Chair,
Larry?
I'm sorry, Ken.
Sorry, I wanted to clarify that, just because I wonder if they would even bother announcing our
Larry?
support.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we vote to support the efforts of the Community Preservation Coalition, the Community Preservation Coalition in their efforts to
There
get
is a
voters
motion, there is a
to-
motion on the agenda.
what?
Read the one at the bottom.
Is it on the bottom?
Yes.
All right, I can read it on the bottom then. I'm all tongue-tied here. Move to vote to support in support of Article 5, the Community Preservation Act, on the March 13th, 2023 special town meeting warrant.
I'll second that enthusiastically.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, those in favor, excuse me, we'll do roll call vote. Greg?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Good luck at the town meeting
Thank you.
in March.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask one quick question? Are there going to be any outreach meetings for the public prior to the March 13th? She's shaking her head back there.
Prior to March 13th, I'm not sure, but definitely before the ballot vote. So if it passes to be on the ballot, there will definitely be outreach meetings before
All right.
the.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Can I make a suggestion that if you want this to make it on the ballot, that you do outreach before the March 13th meeting? Because I can already hear the people at the meeting on March 13th saying they don't want their taxes going up, especially with the way the water bills have gone up recently. Just because I've been at all the town meetings and all I'm hearing from people is outcry about the tax piece. So as much as I may support this, and I may not have a problem with paying this on my tax bill, I know that there are a lot of families that are in dire straits and they may have a problem with it, so.
Right, and that's why we have the exemptions. The first $100,000 doesn't count. There's an income exemption. If you are low income, you're not going to have to pay this.
Right.
There's an elderly exemption, where if you're elderly, you won't have to pay it as well.
Right, no, I understand that, but I understand
I
that, but
understand what you're saying, too.
But the people that may be there to vote may not be those people. I know you get what I'm saying. I just want to help you help
Yes, thank
yourself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, our next agenda item is the special town meeting warrant, Article number 3, the capital purchase discussion and vote. And before I provide any information on this item, I'm going to look around the room to see if anybody else has information on this item.
Help me.
Which one are we on?
We're on 9B.
Okay.
Okay, the item before you, agenda item 9B, is another item that is on the special town meeting warrant. This is the special town meeting that will be taking place in March. This warrant item is to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $40,000 for broadcast equipment upgrades and staff support in Town Hall, or to take other actions thereto. If you'll recall, during one of our January meetings, I believe, we had the discussion here about our inability to live stream our meetings due to the broken equipment that exists in the town hall. The town of Winchendon has secured a consultant to rebuild that live stream equipment in a way that would allow us to do future live streaming, which I think we all agreed is something we want to continue to seek as a committee. The town is in receipt of a new contract with the Comcast Cable Company that provides funding that could be used for these kinds of repairs, but because the funds have to be allocated through town meeting, that is why you see this warrant item on the, why you see this item on the warrant for March. In order for the town to move those funds, to make those upgrades, this item would need to pass. Similar to our last item, we are only considering this as an option to vote to support or not support. And so you can see why the school committee would have a vested interest in whether or not that article passes. That is about all the information we have on that. Happy to entertain any questions or a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Greg?
Just for informational purposes, we did, as a member of the town's, I don't know why they don't call it the Cable Advisory Committee, but the Communications Committee for the town. This is one of the things that we were able to get put into the contract with Comcast this time around. And so the money would be even if it's coming from free cash, would be allocated eventually from the money that will come to us through the contract with Comcast. So it's not going to result in any additional burden on the taxpayers of the town at all. So I would make a motion to support Article 3, capital purchase on the March 13th, 2023 special town meeting warrant.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just want to clarify, this is just for live streaming equipment, not for possible Zoom or anything like that, correct?
Says broadcasting equipment.
Right, I
so-
just want to clarify, just to make sure.
Unless anyone
you
else
don't
has that
know.
answer, I don't know that we can answer that
Okay.
absolutely
Well,
definitively.
it's for that, and not specifically for Zoom, but it's live streaming and also generally just improving the equipment that we have here, taking that, and, I mean, I don't know where they're actually going to put it. We've talked about possibly moving it up to the third floor, moving the facilities and expanding them a little bit, and just having modern equipment as opposed to 20th century equipment in there.
You want modern equipment? Silly. All right, thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the item? All right, we'll take a roll call vote. Karen?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. It is unanimous. Fantastic. Thank you. That brings us to items 7 and 7A, which is the superintendent's update and the budget update.
Great, thank you. Let me just bring that up on the screen and ask Ms. Babinski to give us a presentation on the budget.
Okay, so in your packets, you have 3 handouts, actually. You have the full Munis report. And then you have the budget report, and then you also should have a copy of the transfer
Yeah.
request that I put together. So for the transfer request, basically what I've done is taken the Munis report, and you'll see there's a lot more negative accounts on the budget report. So what I've done is, if you look at the orange, those are salaries that have been forecasted through the end of the year. The pinks are any stipend type timesheet salary line items that I'll be reconciling every week based on our receipt of those timesheets. And then the blue in the available budget columns are any items that are on the salary transfer line, whether there's going to be money transferring in or out of the particular line. And green is expense transfer. There's very few expense transfers. They're typically pretty minor things, you know, certain memberships, in particular, like MASC, things like that. We don't necessarily know those amounts. We do an estimated percentage increase each year, but when the number comes in, they could be slightly different. So, as far as salary transfers go, a lot of business managers have different styles on how they do that. I would encourage, typically in the fall, once you have all your new staff hired, that you do sort of your forecast and you can move things along. There's certainly times when, for example, a veteran teacher may request to move at a grade level and new teacher is hired at a lower step, so there could be some money changing within the line items. So if you look at the budget transfer form, you'll see that there's a zero net impact. Each line item is going from salary to salary and from expense to expense. So there isn't a need for a vote, but just for transparency's sake, we wanted to be able to share this with you so that you would know what we're sharing with Town Hall. So in doing this, we're able to say, okay, we know that this particular line is going to go over because we have staff that we're going to pay through the end of the year. We know that we want to take it from this line, and we make sure that the money is transferred appropriately so that we don't have an issue at the end of the year where, you know, somebody puts in a purchase order or something like that, and they didn't know our intent to transfer money. So these are forecasted through the end of the school year. Typically, at the end of the year, you'll see lots of little transfers that need to happen, of course. So there may be another transfer. There may even be one where we have to transfer from expense to salary or salary to expense as we, finalize the year purchases and whatnot. But this should get us in a place where we won't see any negatives on Munis based on the forecasting that we're doing at this point in time. Again, there's nothing that I flagged red as something for you to be overly concerned about. We are working on some special education out-of-district tuition. Extraordinary relief claims are coming up in March, so we have seen an increase in tuition for out-of-district students for this school year. So that is something that we're working on, but we feel good about our plans for that.
Amanda, does this account for all of the cleanup up until now, of course, not including what happens at the end of the year?
Correct.
And is Town Hall ready for this?
Yes, yes, they are. So I spoke with Joanne about it and just sort of said, I was thinking about doing this because we worked really hard in putting staff in the right line items, you've already done that work has been done, so we know that these accounts are going to be negative and whatnot, and she was very supportive of us taking care of this ahead of time. They have hired a full-time accountant who started on Monday.
Oh, good.
So I said, it might be 2 pages long, and she said, it would be a really great opportunity to train on this, and then it might save her some time at the end of the year from having to do too many of these, so.
Great.
They are expecting this.
And if I can add, this is something we do typically closer to the end of the year. It's an exercise that, without Amanda, we would be waiting until we get closer to the last couple of payrolls to sort of make sure this happens, so that really the exercise is so we can zero out these accounts and then do the sort of the end of year report in a realistic way. But by doing this now as well, it helps us forecast the monies that we'll have left and sort of start thinking about those end of year projects much earlier than we would have typically done that, so we can do a better job planning. Where we're usually probably talking about doing this somewhere in May and trying to clean that up and zero out all the line items. So really this is a step for us to do it in a much earlier way and be more efficient about how we think about planning the end of the year. So it's a lot of work that Amanda's done. We're very appreciative that she's taken the time to do all this so early.
Superintendent King really did highlight the most important part of this is seeing what you have left based on your obligations so that you can plan for the spring, so that you're not done spending money when you could potentially have more money to spend, and you can meet the needs that you have and really think things through.
The increase in tuition, what are we chalking that up to? Is that transportation or an increase in just?
No, it's actually an increase in students that are in out-of-district placements.
Okay.
Yes.
I have to say that unfortunately, from the mass conference that I know that we're looking at, by the end of 2024, 2025, we're looking at an increase in SPED out-of-district costs for schools of a significant amount.
We're looking at 14% starting
Right.
July 1st, yes.
Right. Well, I mean, and then
And then potentially more.
it's
Yep.
going to be more like 40% is
What
what
was
they
that?
were talking about at the mass conference, so.
What is that percentage you just quoted?
14% for July 1st.
What is that, a 14%?
So,
For this
a
year.
particular tuition for a student that's going to an out-of-district school, there's a daily rate for how much tuition we pay for that student to attend. That daily rate is increasing 14%, which is sort of an unprecedented increase. Some of the things that, there's been a lot of advocacy by schools, school committees, school business officials, to the governor and the Senate and House, all of those things, to look at ways to help school districts because, we'll certainly feel it here in Winchendon, and some of our neighbors will feel it, even more significantly than us. Some of the things that they're talking about is looking at funding circuit breaker at 100% or 90%, excuse me. Typically, it's funded between 75 and 80%, so that could be some additional relief for districts. Unfortunately, that claim wouldn't be realized until the following year, so it's not necessarily an immediate fix. Looking at rural aid and some funding for that. as well. You know, there's been a lot of things that have been thrown around, but I know that they did have an updated budget meeting with the Lieutenant Governor earlier this week, and sort of the loud cry from the audience was the 90% reimbursement rate for circuit breaker to sort of alleviate some of the concerns. So that is going to be shared with the governor, and we'll see what the budget comes out the first week of March.
Very excited about that one. So the 90% would only be at the end of the fiscal year, though, right?
Correct. So our circuit breaker claim is due by July 31st for this year's expenses, and then they fund it, you know, in next year's fiscal year. Typically, districts will try. You're allowed to keep circuit breaker for one additional year beyond the year that you receive it. So districts do try to, you know, use that as an aid, because we know that students, you know, will go in and out of district placements. It's something that's very hard to budget for, and it's extremely expensive. So it's something that districts will use to sort of help with that cost.
In preparing the FY24 budget,
Yes.
will you use a 14% increase as a likely placeholder?
Yes, I will, yes. So we've spent a lot of time, I've been lucky to spend time with Nicole and Kathy Brooks. We actually went student by student. We've listed out any students that we are concerned could potentially be placed in and out of district, looked at everything, looked at the daily rates, multiplied them by 14%, and actually went by the date. So we do have that number sort of as finite as we could get, and we're certainly going to meet tomorrow and discuss, you know, how it's a huge increase. So, you know, how we want to take that on for next year, and then we'll present it. Yeah.
One more question.
Yes.
Just to give us a ballpark, would the 14% be on the special education portion of the budget on page 5? That's 1.7 in total?
Yes, that's correct. Yes,
That's
correct.
a big chunk of change.
Yes, and in addition to that 1.7, we have seen additional students go out of district this year. We have a huge need right now with students with mental health issues, special education needs and whatnot. You know, it's sort of a testament to the time that we're facing right now. So special education will definitely be the focus of the FY24 budget.
And I think if I can as well, I think the receipts that we're collecting this year for circuit breaker that Ms. Babinski was just discussing, we saw an increase for this year for FY23. I would say roughly, actually a little bit over double what we typically receive. So although it doesn't offset the 14% going into FY24, it certainly doesn't hurt. And then, of course, you know, it does run a year behind, if you will. So we would expect to see, you know, an even higher receipt, you know, next year, knowing that we're sending more students out of district and that we'll be able to recover some of those costs. But we're kind of fortunate this year that we are in receipt of circuit breaker charges that are much higher than we typically receive. So it does offset, but it won't cover it all.
Mr. Chair,
Larry?
so I know that we've started some really good programs here to try and keep students from out-of-district placements. Are we still reviewing to see if we can keep some of those kids here with some new programs that might be less expensive than sending them to CAPS or someplace?
That's a great question. And so, you know, as I think you've already heard in a prior school committee meeting, we are anticipating another really positive budget in terms of, you know, the SOA funds we've been discussing in one of the subcommittees. It close to a 10% increase, just like we saw last year. And so in contemplating how we will spend that money going forward, of course, a piece of it has to go to this increased tuition cost, but the other focus, one of the other foci at the very least, is talking about how we can sort of talk about different programs in district you know, of course, everybody brings forward their wish list, if you will, not the least of which is the special education department. And what the special education department is bringing forward is additional teachers specifically for sub-separate programs to give us a broader reach, but also to address, you know, those most critical students in a more specific way than we currently do in our current programming. So you will see that in the proposed budget. I think we're talking about at the March 2nd meeting that we're going to be bringing forward a proposed budget for FY24. You'll see it
So,
there.
so, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
if, not if, but the reorganization plan that you've shared with us, there should be room at Toy Town for programs.
Correct.
So that's one of the selling points, one of the benefits of your reorganization plan is that we'll have space for particular programs, and maybe even invite other school districts possibly to participate in our programs and generate some revenue that way.
Well, in addition, we've had some, and I'll say very cursory conversations, and I don't mean we've all sat down at a table and, you know, had in-depth conversations about, you know, really specifically sub-separate programs. And when we say that, it's, you know, for us, it's our all program. So for students who are pulled out of typical, you know, classrooms and need, you know, really specialized education. And so what we know in the districts that are like us, around us, that they're all very small. And one of sort of the limits of our budgets is that specific piece. You know, coming from a larger district, you know, I had the experience of having 4 distinct sub-separate programs in one building that addressed very different and specific needs. Here, we have one program, and if you need a sub-separate classroom, you sort of go there. And I feel, you know, honestly, the teachers that do that work, God bless them, because, you know, they're not even focusing on a very one distinct specific need. So, you know, that's sort of the limit of being in a small district and the type of budgets we have. So as we move forward, one of the really nice things about SOA, and that's sort of what it's intended to address. We know that special needs have a correlation with poverty, and SOA is intended to address sort of poverty around, and specifically special education and EL students and so on. So we will certainly target that as we move forward to think about how we can better serve. But in conversations with some other superintendents, there's also a conversation to say, instead of each of us trying to think about how to run all of these varied programs that one might need, there's also some very cursory conversations to think about it from, well, what if you had a program that addressed this particular need, we have a program that addresses a separate need, and so on, and think about how we can work together. And you've brought this up many times, Mr. Murphy, about how we can work together. This isn't about, you know, charging each other or you know, going into a regional district type of piece. It's about how, as a small district, that we can continue to work efficiencies and do a better job at serving our students in a bit of a creative way. So it's something that's also on the table. Again, it's, you know, we're not too far down the road, but it's something that we've begun discussing. We all have the same problem, quite frankly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions on the budget? Budget update, I mean? Okay, Mr. Superintendent?
Great. Thank you. And as I said, we will be at the March 2nd meeting, we will be bringing forward our preliminary FY24 budget. So you can look forward to seeing that when we return from break, quite frankly. Great. So I believe our next item on the agenda is sort of some data updates, if I'm not mistaken here. Oh, nope, district reorganization update. I apologize. So real quickly, we were able to create our steering committees for our reorganization plan, as we've discussed. And at this point in time, we've had 2 meetings for each of the 3 initial steering committees, which is 1 for each sort of proposed building. So we've had, you know, our sort of pre-K committee, we have a 1 through 4 committee, and we have a middle school committee. Those committees were formed from, as presented here, with a representative from each of the grade levels, special educators, what I call allied artists, you know, art, music, whatever, that type of person, possibly related services for special education, and then a community member and or parent as well that is participating in each of those. I'm sure I'm missing someone. And then additionally, we have someone from central office to sort of sit and observe so that we can bring back information, as well as a union official that sit and sort of take notes. So One of the ways that we've sort of approached this is that each of those 3 meetings, we've tried to have common agendas as we go forward, so that we can be discussing the same items, each week. The first week was really in an effort to sort of establish norms and discuss the expectations of the committee. What is this committee charged with specifically? And then sort of as well let's get this off the ground with raising questions and concerns. So if you're the first grade representative, you're tasked with or charged with bringing concerns for that entire team to that meeting and representing your team and so on. So the first meeting was really revolving at each one of these around that type of topic. The second meeting, which we just had this week, at each of these was really to get more in-depth into a timeline. And so if we think about this from an overall perspective, we really at each of these meetings want to first get logistics out of the way, meaning specifically the timeline. When do we need boxes? When do they have to be packed by? When do we call the movers? And then as we wrap that up, the second step will be to get into sort of the uniqueness of each building. And they're all going to have something different that they need to address, and how that building will operate and so on and so forth. So the second meeting, we did put forward a timeline and discuss timelines with sort of hard set dates, where we're seeing right now the week prior to April break, which I believe is April 10th, is where we are set to be delivering boxes, if you will, to each of our buildings that are in need. That'll be at some point over the course of that week so that folks can start receiving those. We have a hard deadline of boxes packed, if you will, by the Monday following the end of the school year, which, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head, that is currently June 26th, would be that following Monday. So those are a couple of the hard deadlines. The other items that are discussed is teachers would like to know, of course, their placement and where they're going to be. We're committed to doing that as well mid-April, so that folks, we can relieve some of that anxiety, as well as building layouts. We have to get those building layouts in place. In other words, where's your room going to be, quite frankly, in that same timeline, so that as you pack your boxes, we anticipate having some sort of labeling system where as you get your boxes, you'll also get labels and you can smack those on a box and we know where they're going to go. We're just wrapping that up, and as of the last meeting, we proposed that timeline. The additional piece we spoke of that really is with logistics is actual furniture requirements. What happened there is, hey, the desks are shorter in certain places, so we're going to have to move some desks around. So talking about what each grade level wants and would like, and we have a lot of furniture in storage as a result of COVID, so being thoughtful about what we want where, again, the logistical component. And then the other piece in that first meeting, if I go back, that where we raised questions and concerns, we brought that back at a leadership level to say, what are the common questions and concerns, so again, we could have a common agenda going forward. So those are the types of things that we're working on, so we can address everything in common. And then, so we should be within a couple of weeks moving into the individual school requirements, whatever that may be. Getting in conversations about whether it's curriculum, whether it's vertical alignment, those types of things that need to be addressed, and how the schools will actually operate individually. We're kind of putting off, that's what teachers are chomping at the bit to find out, but if we don't get logistics taken care of, it's not gonna make a difference on those conversations. So I think we're moving along pretty well. We'll start getting these things posted on the websites and different places, as well as getting a weekly update out once we have some substantive information to share.
Questions?
No questions.
Great.
All right, so that brings us to data presentations, which we've promised early in the year that we would be doing that. So we have 2 data presentations tonight. We have Ms. Ann Diaz, the principal of Toy Town, to present on some Toy Town data, obviously, and we have Mrs. Rickson for the Murdoch High School to present some things that we have found there. So let me bring that up. You guys can tell me next when it's appropriate. And you should have, I think you have actually slides as well in your packet. You have a printout.
Next, please. Next, please. Thanks. All right, so I am so excited to speak on behalf of the progress that Toy Town has been making. And we're actually really excited about the tools that we've been using to get there. We've been teaching our teachers more deeply in how to look at their data. So I think that we've been really used to collecting data, and then it sits in the shelf until we need it for report cards. And so it's been really great to actually use the STAR Renaissance assessment program. We had several staff members that were highly trained in it to really help people. And the data drills it right down to the standard level. So our teachers come out of our common planning time meetings with really knowing exactly where their students are, so we can focus on what they need for the Tier 1 instruction all the way down to Tier 3 instruction. So that being said, our reading, our student growth percentile at this point in the year, so we still have some time to go, our reading right now is at 75th, what? I just gave myself some points. 70th percentile, and our math student growth percentile is at the 48th percentile. So we're hoping to get our math score up even more now that our reading's getting stronger, because a lot of that reading at third, fourth, and fifth grade is, a lot of our math is reading. So, okay. So that's our just a little reminder of where we started, but if we go to the next slide, that will help us look at our growth. So, like I said in the fall, we noticed that we had a lot of students that really needed specific interventions with a small group to really help move them in their learning. But we also kept our students in the tier 1, so in the general classroom, to also be able to stay on track with the grade level expectations. So we sort of set up our learning block that at the midpoint, after they've heard the grade level, terminology in the lesson. At the midpoint, that's when special education services were happening and interventions. So that essentially gave all the students a smaller group to learn in, and we could really be specific about targeting certain standards. And at Toy Town, it isn't just about moving all of our students out of the red, which we're thrilled is happening, but it's really about looking at all students and all of their needs. So making sure that we're addressing them at that standard level. So at the beginning, we did have a substantial number of students that were not meeting the expectations. And at this point, through our work with the staff, we've really, again, with the interventions, but we've also been diving into calling what we're doing for our teachers a culture of achievement. So we've been really specifically targeting, my leadership team has been teaching the teachers specific learning strategies that help move all students. So with that, when we just had our SSOS walkthrough, we focused on 2 areas, and that was routines and habits of discussion. And then we reported back to teachers on how that was looking with a data collection, and it's looking really good. So instead of just going through a walkthrough process and not really knowing what people were looking at, we've been really specific about it. So that's really helped move our students as well. So,
Can I ask
yes.
a quick question?
Yes.
When you say partially meeting expectations, what exactly, to me, that sounds like being partially pregnant.
Yes.
That if you're partially meeting expectations, how many are at the low end, close to not meeting expectations at all? How many are close to meeting expectations? How do you assess that? To me, either they're meeting expectations or they're not.
They're either doing it or not. That makes perfect sense. For students that are reading, you're either, it's not even like you're either reading it or you're not. You could be breaking down at the foaming level. You might just have not had a lot of exposure to direct reading. Like we've been teaching using Orton Gillingham as a Tier 1 intervention across the board. We've been able to really pull back on that because we're using it more what it's intended for a Tier 3 intervention. But there's so many things that it's like reading is like the hardest thing that you're gonna learn besides, walking and sitting upright. Like it takes so many muscles that you have to develop in order to be a good reader that you can be on like a continuum where, okay, this student, he read Hop on Pop. Well, he also might have a lot of it memorized, and this student's reading Harry Potter and comprehending it. Like there's such a huge amount of growth that happens. So we're really able to drill it down and kind of celebrate the successes at each point.
Okay, so for partially meeting expectations, like what I guess should be telling myself in my own mind is that they're making some progress, but they're not. Okay.
It's huge. It's the difference between a student reading something like mid-year and somebody saying mid-year reading, star reading, and this is, I'm going to speak to the reading assessment, you know, like that sort of a thing. So it really, it's not like being a little pregnant. It's like being a little bit on the right path to reading, for sure. But
Thank you.
that's a great question. I'm going to think about a lot. So, so for us, when we look at our beginning of the year data, and we knew that we had 60 students that were across the whole school not meeting expectations, we knew that there was a big problem that we had to solve. We needed to get in there and figure out what parts, where the learning gaps were, but to keep students on track with learning with their peers. So since the beginning of the year, through our interventions, through really drilling down our data and providing support, we have been able to shrink the amount of students that were not meeting the expectations by 9%. So we're moving students that are in red to yellow, and we actually had one student that went from red all the way to blue. So it's really incredible when you figure out exactly what skills are missing and you fill in those holes. So like I said, we have a lot to celebrate. We are really excited about the 2 students that went from the blue all the way to the green, and we're hoping that by staying the course and really keeping high expectations for our students and teachers, that we're going to continue to see growth.
How did your student population change from the beginning of the year to the mid-year? Or is it a very static student population?
It's not static. It's, we have a somewhat transient population. So we've acquired some students. We haven't lost any, but we've acquired some from different districts. So it's important that we keep that in mind when, you know, we're looking at assessments and that sort of thing. But we find it so important to have sort of that general diagnostic test with the star reading, that we're able to really get to know that student quickly and figure out what's going to work best for them for learning. So we just kind of stop the train and figure out what that student needs, and then, you know,
So you
bring
said
them in.
You've gained a few students
Oh, several.
since the beginning? Yeah,
Yes. Yep.
thank you.
All right, we can go ahead to the next one to take our look at our mid-year. So again, I think it's probably, this is drilled down by our grade level. So in using our, like, we were hoping to be a little bit further along with our students in math, but in learning a new program, we knew that it would take a little while to get growth, but we are excited about the growth that we are seeing. We need to put a little bit more of our focus and attention on improving the student learnings that's happening in math, and that's what we're looking forward to help us along between now and the end of the year. So if we go to the next one, we can look at that from a school-wide area. That is a lot of green. We're extremely happy about that. We have a lot of students moving in the right direction. Again, we just find that it's super important to be able to assist the teachers in learning this new program, but also we have a great Tier 2 program. We're using VMath with students, and we look at the data every 6 to 8 weeks and really make sure that we're addressing those standards that students need more skills in.
And what's VMath?
VMath is it's a supplemental math program, and the way that we determine what students are going to be using that is if they struggled with a standard that we've already tested. So if we've already taught fractions and adding fractions, and you're in 4th grade and you're just not quite getting it, VMath it's almost like it has a workbook component. There's also an online component, but we find it's better with the workbooks and hands-on manipulatives to really reteach and have the kids work through what they're missing. So then they're still getting the Tier 1 instruction, but then for that extra half an hour, 40 minutes, they're getting additional math support. So we don't want kids to be pushed through. We don't want kids to feel like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. I missed long division and now I can't figure it out. You know, we don't want kids to feel like that. We want to get them right away and continue to build their supports. And the great thing about that is when they learn different activities and games in their pull-out time, that can easily be a center with their other peers and continue to work on that. Because a lot of times it takes more than those 6 weeks that people spend on one part of a lesson. It takes that real deep dive so they can really learn and figure out what they need to do. So,
Great, thanks.
yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
can I just ask, what is Delta? I know
A
it's.
change.
a change.
Yep, and sometimes it's like a negative, but these are all real positives. So if you look at our beginning of the year,
Yeah.
we had the 79 students school-wide that were not meeting the expectations.
Yeah.
I'm not pregnant, right? And so we're super
not use
excited to look at anytime you have a student that moves from a category to the next up, like from a red to a yellow, is a huge celebration at Toy Town, because it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do that. But we don't neglect anybody in the blues and greens either. We're constantly trying to find ways to continuously challenge all of our students. And the great thing is that the screener that we use, the Star Math, we also have Freckle, which sounds adorable, and it's really, it's a progressive program that the students do, that when you go in and you do your assessment, it knows exactly what you know, and then it will continually get harder as you gain more skills. So it's great. We use those as a center as well. So that's what a delta is, sorry.
Oh, I just see that, obviously, at -6, you think that's a negative, but it's actually gone down, so it's a positive.
That's right.
But I didn't quite get what the delta meant, so thank you for clarifying that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I think just to speak on a couple of very quick things that Ann or Ms. Diaz has moved past, is the Freckle and the VMath are pieces that were intentional for us as we started this year to say, we want to assess kids, and we've been doing this for years, but what we've been doing for years as well is taking that data and looking at it and telling you about it, but not talking about what do we do with it? How does that drive instruction? When we know a child doesn't understand something, what are we doing to fix that? And so one of the things if you'll recall, when we brought in this IM Math, our new program, is we also brought in their sort of complementary intervention services. And so we talk about intervention, it's about trying to bring children back up to speed, if you will. So those are, sort of services that are in line with our Renaissance program, which we use for our data work. So they're very aligned, and we get really good information coming out of that. But I think as well, to speak to Greg, to put this in a different light, if you think of meeting expectations as those children are working on grade level. So if you're a fifth grader, you should be meeting, you're meeting expectations if you're working on grade 5. Partially meeting might mean some things you're at grade 5, but maybe some other things you're at grade 4. And not meeting expectations probably basically means you're not on grade level, period, right? And then exceeding would be you're working above grade level. So just to kind of think about it from a little bit different way and sort of breaking it down into the different levels of reading, if we think about it from a grade level perspective, what we want is all of our students to be working on grade level and meeting those expectations. So it's just a different way to think about that for someone like myself. So are we ready for Mrs. Dixon to talk about the high school?
Okay, so we're going to talk about our ninth grade math, and you can see by our, I label mine a little bit different than Ann. I use my fall as my benchmark testing, so that's where we started the year off, and then the mid-year. So you can start to see a change in the STAR Math program. So we've actually made significant gains from not meeting to partially meeting in both of those particular areas. Although we did make some gains in meeting expectations, they didn't have the same growth as the math, as the other two. What we're really excited about is, we are starting a new math program this year. So I was a little, anxious to see what the results would look like, because we are doing the IM Math. It's a new curriculum for the teachers, and we are bringing in math consultants to work with them. Looney Math is coming in to work with our teachers to plan with them, help them plan lessons, help them model the lessons, and really have done a really good job of trying to use the program with fidelity. So I was anxious to see what would happen with our students, and they've been making a great progress with IM Math, and I think the teachers are very pleased with what's happening there. It's difficult for them to do a new program, so I give them a lot of credit for really following the program to fidelity and really taking the time to look at the data. What I really wanted to stress was, our ILT team will be looking at this data because we just took this test last week, so you're going to have to talk a little about one of the reading programs with you when we get there. But our students just took this last week, so our staff has not had a chance to actually take a look at the data and done a deep down dive. So when we come back from vacation, that is our first order of business, is to take a look at, where where the students are showing deficiencies in their particular math programs. But in the classroom for Tier 1 interventions, they are using the ALEX program. And what's really good about that is very similar to the Freckle, is that the teachers know where the students are having their issues, and they're able to go in and do that with them. We do have some students who are out, taken out of the classroom, and we hired somebody this year to work with some of our students who need extra supports. So those students do work with another teacher, and they're making tremendous progress as well. So what's also good about the IM Math is they have specific days in the lessons or within the curriculum that you have for extra help days. So when the students aren't doing or aren't being successful in one particular area, they can take a look at the STAR testing or what they performed on the IM cool downs and such, and go back and target those particular areas for those students and work in the classroom during Tier 1. So the IM Math really seems to be making a great difference. And you can see that we've done a great job in grade 9 anyhow, so we've made some progress there in that. Okay, we can go to the next one.
Grade 10?
Oh, grade 10, still doing math. I was still on grade 9, sorry. Grade 10 math. Okay, same thing for the math. We're using the IM Math with geometry. Again, we're working with Looney Math, and Rob Lukasik just came in last week to work with some of our 10th grade teachers and some of our special ed teachers who are not actually math specialists. They've been working with our teachers to plan lessons, show them how to work the IM Math, and help them with and go into the classroom and do modeling. We actually have a teacher who is not a math specialist, and her students did remarkably well. She was very nervous about teaching the math curriculum because that's not her specialty, but the IM Math really helps the teachers and guides them into what they need to do. And again, that is also, part of the IM curriculum is giving some time for the kids to do their remediation at certain points within the curriculum. So having these benchmark testing every 6 to 8 weeks really is helpful. And again, when we come back from vacation, the ILTs are going to be sitting down with their teams to decide, how do we want to move forward and what specific things do we want to look at. The MCAS is coming up, and I'm very happy with the growth I've seen in the grade 10 using the IM Math, and I think the teachers are very excited to continue to use it now that they're seeing the results. I think at first they were worried, but I think the results are speaking for themselves around the math for sure. So you've seen some growth. Almost 10% of the students improved from partially meeting, which as Thad was saying, to me, partially means they're not quite at grade level yet or where they need to be, but they're getting closer. Obviously the red means unsatisfactory, so we do have some work to do with those students, and we're looking at giving them some more Tier 3 interventions and using some pullouts and really targeting some of the areas that they need supports in. So that's what we'll be looking at for grade 10. Okay, grade 9, just explanation, we're going to show the good, the bad, and the ugly, so I just want to put that out there. When we did the STAR testing, unfortunately, the staff member who, the 9th grade staff member, was out. His family member passed away, so he was out for the full week. He came in one day, and he did give the students some testing, but there was quite a few students who didn't take it because we actually had the blackout on that particular day as well. So these results are not probably where they need to be. So I had a conversation with him, and he was, I really am apologize. I said, listen, family things happen, and again, we were all here last Wednesday when we had the blackout, so, we did have some Wi-Fi issues that day as well. So when he comes back from vacation, he's going to retest the students to see what we get for results. And I'm hoping to see better results. If not, then we're going to have to drill down and see what's happening. In the English department, we are working with a new program. It's off to a roaring start today. We worked with consultants from SRSD, which is a writing program that our staff members were really embracing today. They were very excited that the program SRSD really is in line with what they're doing with our race, because we use race in our handbook, and it was very complimentary. So today they really spent a lot of time with a consultant at SRSD to help them really do a better job of working with students and how to pull out information So they were excited today with that, and I think that we have another workshop coming up March 10th, and they're very excited. So hopefully, when we present the memorial and the middle school, I can come in that day to see if the results are different for the grade 9. So that's something we're looking at. So I'm hoping, we'll see.
Mr. Chair?
Greg?
Just, and again, I may be
Yep.
oversimplifying this, but it looks like the increase in those not meeting expectations, just looking at it real quickly, it looks like most of those came from the meeting expectations group.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, and again, some of them were probably from the partially meeting expectations as well. But I guess what my concern is, or what I'm asking you is what your concern is,
Well,
in terms
yeah.
of being able to get those kids that landed in the not meeting expectations box to get back on track and get back up to where they were before and hopefully beyond.
Yeah, I agree.
Do they need, are there going to be extra after-school help and,
Yep, we are actually looking at right now, I just started looking at this, as we said, we just finished this last week, so I'm really trying to take a look at student by student to see where we're seeing the deficiencies. So we're looking at it student by student, and there will be, after-school help, some small group work. We've actually brought in, I have a special ed teacher who's going to be going into one of the 9th grade classes to see what they can do to support them a little bit more. But one of the very first things I really need to do is really look at where the deficiencies are, and I haven't drilled down quite that far yet to see, where we're having where our issues are. So I agree with you. I think the issue is where the meeting expectations were, did it go into the not meeting. But I also have to say there was about 28 students who did not take the test yet. Yeah. So that is a good quarter of the class. So once we see that, there may be a change. So I'm kind of waiting to see what that looks like. But we do have a plan in place, and I do know that the 9th grade teacher is very concerned about that as well. So we had talked about, how can we get them up to speed and see what we can do. So we will be delving into that a little bit more once we come back from February break, for sure. You got it.
And I think to reiterate what you said, I think it's every teacher's worst nightmare is to be giving any type of high-stakes test, whether it's a unit test, whatever it is, and they're not there. Like,
Well,
let's
that
be
was it.
honest, we've all sat in a classroom with a substitute, okay? So, I mean, in this particular case, that's what was going on, is
Yeah.
we're delivering a high-stakes test because that's when it was scheduled, and there's a substitute in the room. And so, I think that Ms. Rickson's being very kind and sort of not bringing that back up, but I think it's a really important piece to say, we're going to have the teacher in the room when he's returned from his family death, and do this test over just to, students are always more serious in that situation, so to maybe get a more accurate representation of where the students are and then sort
Correct.
of reconvene, so.
And
at any rate.
he did say, because I wasn't there, I'm not sure what stock the students did when I wasn't there, and I wasn't able to reiterate the importance of it. So he did mention that as well. So I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed that it's definitely going to be better. Because when you see the next slide,
Mr.
10th grade did remarkable.
Well, before you, just a quick question,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair.
sure.
Yes, Larry?
Why did we miss 20 kids on the test? Were they absent that day? Or
There
were
was
they-
some absences, but we also had some glitching with the Wi-Fi. So some of the kids in the first period, but before the teacher came in, he didn't realize at the time, and then they couldn't get the Wi-Fi hooked up, and then there was some glitches, and then there was issues almost all day on that particular Wednesday with the Wi-Fi.
Remember, we were impacted on Wednesday with the power outage
With the
across
power
the town, so
outages.
the
And
Murdoch
that's-
High School was impacted
It's the only day
as
that
well.
that teacher
Okay.
was able to give that test.
Thank you.
And also, sometimes that students don't understand that really isn't, we're going to be really looking at this data. I think there's a culture sometimes of kids thinking, oh, it's not a big deal. I don't know if you have experienced that, but, let me just click through this. It's no big deal. But then when the kids see the results and they, we have like those data chats with the students and talk about, yikes, you want to make sure that you're trying your hardest because this is going to be how we're picking kids to take extra support groups and that sort of thing, so.
Right, and he wasn't able to share, again, when he came back, which was earlier this week, he hadn't been able to share the results with the students as well. And the students in math and English really do take a look at the results together as a group. So the students do know how well they're performing. And unfortunately, the 9th grade teacher, again, hadn't been able to do any of that with them. So, I will give you a better presentation, hopefully, in a couple of weeks after the students take it. I'm sure we'll see a difference, for sure. So that was really it. But you can tell by the 10th grade that they've really made remarkable progress this year. And I do think that we've really stepped up the writing across the reading department, in the English department. And one of the things I'm focusing on for next year really is to create more writing across the curriculum. We are working with SRSD specifically in our English program, but in talking with Mr. Landman, one of the things I really wanted to work with this year was to really increase some writing in the social studies and the sciences as well. So that will probably, am I right? It's going to be part 2 for next year. So if we can get more writing across the curriculum, that would really be a way for us to, again, do more with the reading across there. So that is something that is on our radar, so that's moving forward. So it's not just, unfortunately, an English department's problem, it belongs to the whole school. So really, we have to do a better job of creating these opportunities for students to have the opportunity to write, and hopefully with this new program, we'll have an opportunity to do that. But I'm very pleased with the overall grade 10. As you can see, there has been gains across the board, especially with we went down from 23% of the students who are not meeting expectation to 14% in the grade 10. So that is quite an accomplishment. We went from 55% to 65% of students are now partially meeting. So they're making progress. A little bit of between meeting expectations from 16% to 19%. And we made that a little pink because, it's not warning, but we, some of the other kids moved, so, we have to take the gains that we can. And exceeding expectations, it would be great to see more students being exceeding expectations, but again, at the benchmark test, at the beginning of the year, what they learn is what they have for knowledge. So we want to make sure that we also keep the literature and the reading more robust. So that is something we're definitely going to be talking about. And again, in the classrooms, I know the teachers do a lot of writing. When I go in, I see the students writing on a basis. They're highlighting all the time. The teachers are really taking the time to work with the students and to do a better job with the writing. And working in small groups. And again, we did the same thing with some of the students who are not meeting expectations. We opened a separate class, not specifically, but for math and reading, we do have extra help for some of those students. We brought in an additional staff member to support those students. So, and those students actually two of them went from not meeting to partially meeting. So I was very impressed with the work that's being done in that particular area for reading. So really, again, working with our ILT, and one of my biggest concerns is really going to take a look at where are we falling short in all of those particular areas. Is it conventions? Is it grammar? Where are we falling short? So our ILT is going to take a look at that and share that information with the staff. As you can see, we are making some growth. Not great, but our aggregate reading, our students are making, low growth, to be honest with you. So, but there is some growth. And math, we're making moderate growth. So really, I think the IM Math has done a great job of getting us up and running. SRSD didn't start till January, so I'm hoping to see a little bit more progress towards as we move on to the rest of the year. But that didn't start till maybe December, right around December, we started that particular program. So hopefully we'll see more support. And I'm trying to get more into the classrooms to really see, how they're working to separate the students into specific groups. Doing some learning walks, we're trying to do more of those as well.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments?
Just a quick question, if I can, and there's probably no way to answer this, but how much of the problem with reading, especially at the high school level, and I don't know if studies have been done on this or not, it can be chalked up to, frankly, to social media and the sort of pretend English that kids use in terms of spelling and what passes for, I won't even call it grammar, but, throwing sentences together, being acceptable in that sphere and just simply not having a clue sometimes as to what the English language actually consists of.
That is a great question. I don't have a lot of information on it. You hear lots of things that social media is great because at least it gets the kids talking and writing, and then you hear the other half that grammar's not so important. So I really don't have a lot of results on that. I don't have a big study.
I was just
We
curious
keep,
as to
it's a
whether-
great question. We keep talking about the SRSD, and it actually stands for Self-Regulated Writing Program. So the students learn how to kind of work backwards. They get a high-quality piece of literature. They have to determine what the topic is, what are the supporting details, and then they have to take that information, and then they have to figure out how to respond to a question. Because we found that a lot of students were just lacking the drive to finish a writing sample. They were not fully answering questions. They didn't really know how to do that. So in doing that, there's another component to it where they have to write something positive to themselves. So we were working with a consultant, Grace Way, and she was just laughing because one of the students wrote to themselves, like, don't ever dull your sparkle. Like, you sparkle on. And she said, I've never seen that before. And we talked about how important it is for the students to sort of pump themselves up because we know writing's hard. It's one of the most difficult things. Ask everybody in here right now if they want to write a nice paragraph for you, and let's see how many people want to do that. So we're taking that into consideration as we're exploring this with students. And when students build their confidence, then you start to move the mountains. When you get a student excited about, if they're into octopuses and you give them an octopus book and they're all over that, like the reading, that love of reading and learning really takes off. So I think it's about figuring out what they're interested in.
Interest is important, for sure.
Right, and then making it come alive for them and giving them the right materials to keep encouraging them. So it's important for parents to just keep talking to their kids, asking what they're interested in, and figuring out how we can help support them as well. So it's easy with the sports because the kids are so into basketball. All the basketball books fly off the shelf and they want to know more and eat up every little thing. Or if they're, it's baseball season's coming, how do you throw a knuckleball? And they get excited about things that are really interesting to them. So we have to take that time to be interested in what they're interested in.
And it's definitely, we have to do more with high interest, what interests the students, what do they want to write about? So really that will be some conversation when we talk to SRSD today. That's what they talked about. It's great that we have some of the classics, but, let's do something the kids are very interested in. Let's get them, they all may be interested in different things, so they can read different things and still write. So really that's what we're looking at, finding things for the kids to be interested in. And it may be something in social media, but it doesn't mean they can't write about it. So sometimes you might have to try to balance it, and the next couple of years is going to be difficult because it's such an integral part of students' lives today. Having a phone and having everything at your fingertips. I mean, we just learned about some new AI that
You're going to have iChat.
we talked to our staff about that a couple of weeks ago.
GPT or
Yeah,
Chat
iChat.
GPT.
iChat, ChatGPT, and
So, again,
Yeah.
that could be a tool we have to use. It doesn't mean it's a scary thing to use, because I first was scary, but I think we have to find ways to embrace these things, and those things students are going to find interesting. So really finding ways to make them interested, because when you're interested, you can do better job writing. And don't forget, our students had not a lot of interaction to do writing in the last couple of years. So, you can't blame the pandemic forever, so it's time to really find ways to introduce them to material that they wanted to use.
We have no idea what jobs we're preparing them for.
Yeah.
So that might be the wave of the future, and it might be exactly what they need to know, but we have to teach them how to read and think logically and get along in a society, and all of those things are so important to making sure that we make the students as successful as possible.
For sure. But I'll be back with my reading results in a couple of weeks, okay?
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Certainly some, we have a mixed bag in there, but there's a lot of good news that just got shared tonight. And so thank you and congratulations to the students and the staff. It is 7:33. If the committee is willing, I'd like to request a brief recess for, let's call it 5 minutes. And so happy to accept a motion to go into recess for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair. Oop.
No, I was just going to say, I'm certainly willing to make that motion. I just want to let I did talk to you about it. The other committee members know that I have a brother coming in from Arizona that I need to pick up at Manchester Airport, so I need to leave here at 7:45. So
Make the motion.
I will make the motion that we take a recess.
Mr. Chair, is there anything that we need Greg for before that?
We have a motion on the floor. Happy to
I'm
take a
sorry.
second before discussion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion is, do we need Greg for anything before he leaves? We don't have any more votes planned, So it's
we still
from
have a
here to be
quorum.
presentations and discussion. and we still have-
Understood, I just didn't know if there was anything that, Greg,
I want to thank the chair for pushing everything
Yeah,
up so we could take the votes before he left. That was
okay.
good management, Mr. Chair.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, those in favor, Greg?
aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We are in recess for 5 minutes until 7:39. to reconvene the the February 16th school committee meeting tonight at 7:40 p.m. We just finished our agenda item 7C. Thank you again to the principals for their data presentations, and that brings us to 7D, the superintendent's formative evaluation presentation. And so when you're ready, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. Before I do that, if you would just allow me one quick item, because I believe that Ms. Delasanta really needed to share something with the committee, a personal accomplishment.
That's what I said.
Yes, I know
well,
Mr. Murphy was pushing
I
for
was-
that, and I think it's really important that Ms. Delasanta shares a personal accomplishment, a very big accomplishment with the committee. So, Ms. Delasanta, please.
Mr. King.
Yes, let's go.
Okay. I hope that we're talking about the same personal achievement.
I do too.
There's so many. We have to narrow it down.
It's my college acceptance, right?
It
Okay.
is.
I have committed to a college, Smith College in Northampton. So I will be there in the fall. You'll find me in Northampton studying political science. So that's my news. Thank you, Mr. King.
You're welcome. I think it should be celebrated.
Congratulations.
Large accomplishment.
That is
Isn't there
wonderful
more?
news.
Oh, that one? Wait, which one?
How many did you get?
Which one?
Okay.
Which one?
Okay. So, okay, fine, Ron. They covered about 90% of the tuition for
That's
me.
amazing.
Congratulations.
So,
Great.
it's exciting.
That is very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah, that's
you.
awesome. That's great stuff.
And when you bring your own contributions into the political science classrooms that you'll be in, you'll talk about your time
Of course I will.
small-town government.
Exactly.
Good for you. Congratulations.
So, Mr. Chair, if I might just, congratulations, Angelina, but I also want to comment that I was just talking to some different parents. Their kids graduated a few years ago, and we need to celebrate the fact that many of the students who graduate from Murdoch and go on to four-year colleges are doing well. And I just heard tonight about a young lady who went to Harvard, and she's been accepted to 3 medical schools. So that's pretty impressive. And, pardon me? Yeah. So, and there's all kinds of stories like that out there. So I just want people to understand that we have really solid students, we have really nice kids, and the more that we support them and the more that we encourage them and show them that we really want them to succeed, the more that they will perform. So we have to up the expectations, we have to give them the support and encouragement they need, and they will hit those marks, as Angelina has done, and students in the past have done. So I just want to make sure people understand that. I mean, we can look at data all we want, but the proof is in the pudding as far as what do the kids do when they leave, and how successful are they with the challenges that they face. And we've got a lot of kids doing really well, and that's a credit to our staff, and that's a credit to our community, and that's a credit to their parents. So we got a lot of good stuff going on, and I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that. And you got to be the poster girl for that acknowledgement tonight, Angelina. But you're not alone. There's a lot of people doing great things that came before you and that will certainly come after you. But good luck at Smith, and
Thank you.
thank you for all you've done for Murdoch High School.
Oh,
Ah.
that's really nice. No, I'm happy. I'm very, very excited.
Thank you,
Mr.
Larry.
Chair.
Yes.
Sorry.
My fault.
Yep,
Started
it's
this.
all your fault. I want to congratulate you, too. It's no surprise, obviously. I'll come visit you.
Please. There's really good restaurants in Northampton.
Oh, there are. But I also want to say that there's no surprise at all that you got that kind of scholarship and that you're going to that kind of school. I do agree with Larry to a point. I just want to make one point that we don't always have to make the point that it's colleges. There's also vocational schools and other apprenticeships
Sure.
and everything else, so it's not
Well-
all about college. Not that, not to knock colleges. I think Smith is great, and I actually know a few Smith alums, so if I can, I'll have to see if I can hook you into some people that I know there and get you hooked up there. But I am so proud of you. Yes, just if you are the person making those cookies, we have to talk before you go anywhere.
I'll send you the recipe, Karen.
Yes. But we will have to make sure we do something before you leave so that we can, as a school committee, send her off with a really good Murdoch celebration.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Larry. Congratulations, Angelina.
Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. I'm going to push through this. I'm looking at my battery here, so it's not a good look. At any rate, so this is, the next section here this evening is the superintendent's formative evaluation presentation, and the chair and I had a conversation about sort of what the presentation will revolve around. And so really, in discussing the goals, my goals, we've had a conversation to talk about the district's goals are my goals. And so the approach, I sort of wrestled with this a little bit in terms of how to present. You all got a link from Liz, if I'm not mistaken, in the packet today, which should link you to a website if you're able to click on it. If you can't hear tonight, you could do it any other time, but it would present you with this very same piece. There are 3 tabs on this particular spreadsheet. So the reason I say I wrestled with it is that our district improvement plan, which is where our goals were all set, is rather large in a spreadsheet form, and it was presented to you early in the year. I think Dr. Landman presented that earlier in the year. So the approach here tonight is to kind of go through in as an efficient way as possible to talk about go through that improvement plan and talk about where we are along the way and, what we've accomplished, what we're working on, and, where we're still going. So if you'll recall, we sort of had, and I don't expect you to, ace the quiz in recalling exactly all of our different priorities, but we have broken each of these out. You'll see, and again on the link, you'll have 3 tabs, I think, at the top. But there are 3 separate and distinct district priorities. So we had one around our math initiative, we had one around ELA work, and we had a third around sort of social emotional learning. And sort of integrated in there are things about progress monitoring and data work and all of those types of things. So what you will see is probably a little bit of repetitiveness between the math and the English, which will allow us to sort of be a little bit more efficient as we move through this. So I'm looking initially here at our first district priority, which was effective implementation of our, which you've heard quite a bit about this evening, our illustrative math, or what we refer to as IM, and the kind of K through 12 Tier 2 math intervention. So to be specific, when we talk about, and you've heard this a lot this evening, Tier 2 is quite simply, when we talk Tier 1, think about being in a classroom and having the day's lesson delivered to you. So we talk about that over the course of a year, that we have to deliver a certain number of lessons to complete the math curriculum, and that's sort of your Tier 1. Everyone receives that. And part of that was our IM adoption, but then we talk about Tier 2, which is a little bit what you heard about this evening. Ms. Diaz talked about it, so did Mrs. Rickson, which is that intervention piece, which is where we take that data and find out where our students are and how do we work with that? How do we help our students move forward when they're not on level? So that's what we talk about when we're referencing Tier 2. That's really what we're referencing. So there was a large initiative this year to adopt the illustrative math. It actually started last spring, near the end of the year, where we began, as you'll recall, we talked about our ESSER funding and how we were going to pay for all of this, quite frankly. It included bringing in a lot of materials, classroom materials, manipulatives, the actual coursework, the different platforms, on and on and on. So some of this began, like I said, back at that time. So our first objective was to set and communicate a vision for math instruction. So I'm over in the left-hand column, which was the actual objective. And we have a number of action steps. So going through this, one was to convene a math curriculum council to draft a vision statement. We have completed those documents. We did that, and you'll see here that the target completion date was in the summer. We completed that. We also drafted a quote-unquote, math blueprint detailing how we would implement IM, basically. So again, convening that math curriculum council to review and finalize the document. There were a couple of measurable goals with that particular action step. And again, both of those were completed at differing times. Some of those were at the beginning of the school year, and some were more recently when we presented the math blueprint. We've talked about it here at school committee, and we've also posted that on, I believe, websites and different locations where folks can see sort of our blueprint, which is really just to tell the community, what are we doing with math in hopefully a plain language sort of way. Another action step was to identify instructional look-fors. So what are we looking for with this math implementation in our classrooms? When we talk about look-fors, if someone were to walk in, someone that's evaluative, if you will, or anyone else, what should we expect to see, and how do we communicate that to teachers as well? Teachers know what these look-fors are. It's not a secret. As a part of our adoption of this program, it's very clear what we should be looking for, whether it's the way that you deliver a lesson, whether it's the way that you progress monitor, so on and so forth. So again, that was completed early in the year, back in August, and was a part of that professional development. Other action steps included conveying all the above to faculty and staff, and as well, parents, students, and the community. So we communicated to faculty clearly at the very beginning of the year at our opening days. We've also had some family nights to communicate to families what we were doing. Again, sharing the math blueprints and discussing with parents how they can support their students with this new math program. I mean, we've always heard about, I don't understand this new math. If you're a parent of a student these days, I don't get the way we do math today, right? So that's a really important part of adopting this new math program. It was really a leap forward for us in the way that we think about math and deliver math, and as a part of that process, we really needed to communicate to families, hey, well, look out, here it comes, and what can you do to support your students? We have a really great team in this district that, and I just want to be really clear, although we're talking about my formative evaluation, this is the work of a very large team that's put in a lot of time and effort to make these things happen, some of which are here tonight and some aren't. But and then conveying the spirit of the math vision statement to students through our individual units. So really, trying to get this off the ground with our students. Again, everybody else knows this was new, and so now the students walk in that first day and conveying to them, you're about to see things very different. You can imagine if you're a, 8th grade student, 7th grade student, 4th grade student, you've been learning math a particular way in this district for a long time. And so what we were trying to do here is that sort of K through 12, line, so that we're aligned vertically throughout our district. So conveying that to our students early on was also completed early in the year. The second objective is the effective provisioning for IM. I won't walk through each and every one of these, quite frankly, but this is about getting the materials, whether that's the manipulatives that you would use in a given class, whether that's getting the materials for the teachers, or whether that's getting up and running the online platforms. So there are many, many components. Not going to hide from the fact that we did have some supply chain issues, that we weren't able to get everything when we would have liked, but it was really outside of our control. So in that meaning, we had some targets where we wanted to get materials over the summer where we could work with teachers. They could put together packets and different things. We were limited by some supply chain issues, but ultimately we did get everything in district, and teachers are supplied with, and students are supplied with all the provisions that they need. And if you have questions, just please interrupt, stop me, whatever you would like to ask on. So as we get into Objective 3, providing professional development and support to facilitate effective program implementation by teachers and administrators. So if you recall, at the beginning of the year, we talked a lot about, the accountability piece to bringing in a new program, and that it was going to take all of us. So, the first piece was, securing and implementing full suites of IM professional development sessions. So again, as you'll recall, we wanted to take the approach of we're going to bring in the actual folks, if you will, who developed, this curriculum. We weren't going to bring in folks down the road who have maybe done it for a year or two. We wanted to bring in top-notch professional development. We say that this is ongoing, not because, we haven't done it all. It's because this is planned throughout this year and into next year. So you will see this as a goal as we continue going. We're on our timelines for this, and we continue to deliver professional development on a regular basis, and we'll continue to do that as well. One of our goals will also be 90% of PD session ratings by our teachers, quite frankly, will be they agree or strongly agree that the PD was useful. So that'll be something that we have to look at as we get closer to the end of the year to see how folks receive the professional development. So far, folks have been it's been received very well. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback from our classroom teachers. We also, as you recall last year, this was budgeted, but hiring a district-based pre-K through 5 math coach to prepare many things, curriculum pacing guides, facilitate math data collection, data-based math common planning, model instruction, and provide instructional feedback. It's a lot to take on. We did hire that person, as you know. A former school committee member, quite frankly. She's doing an amazing job. The coach's schedule will reflect that she has been able to carry out each of these major areas of responsibility. She's in our buildings nonstop, working hand in hand with teachers and building principals, but her primary focus is working with teachers to sort of ensure the integrity and fidelity of delivering this math program, and that we're doing it to the best of our ability. That's an ongoing process. It happens, honestly, every single day in buildings across the district. She's doing an amazing job. We say it's completed, but she's continuing to work. She's hired and continuing. The staff survey will indicate that the teachers find coaches' supports are increasing their ability to use data for planning and to implement IM lesson modeling. So that'll be a survey that will be coming out soon, and we'll do another one probably at the end of the year. But we'll be asking teachers, how's this going, more directly than just sort of getting an informal feedback, if you will. We'll be asking directly how they've received the support from the math coach, the in-district math coach.
Mr. King, Mr. Chair, can I ask? You need water, first of all. It's too dry in here tonight. So I see that the survey was, you have dates here due by. The surveys were due by January 2023. Not yet, and I understand things happen. And I know that you're saying the survey will be out soon. Do we have an anticipated by when?
I think the survey is something that we're currently working on, putting together, and I mean, again, this isn't something that IM provides or whatnot. This is something that we felt was important as a part of the process. So we're working on compiling that survey, and we'll be getting that out, I'm sure, in the next couple of weeks, I would say. Oh, thank you. To get that into those teachers' hands. I'm not trying to hide anything up here tonight. These were the dates that we told you we would be trying to hit.
Right.
We didn't hit everything, but we will ultimately complete everything. So we're still committed to getting that teacher feedback and hearing not only how it's going, but how might we be able to improve it. So we will continue to work on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bring Looney Math. So we've been working with Looney Math, which is a consulting firm, math specifically, to continue to support IM. They've been working with us throughout the district for, I think this is our 3rd year. And so again, we wanted to, with that survey, we would be, same as above, surveying how staff are receiving that Looney Math consultation. We have things sort of, again, not formal, informal, but, teachers share with us regularly how they like. They're very vocal. The teachers, especially when we have outside consultants, I liked this or I did not like this. Please don't bring this person back. We've been working with two particular consultants for a few years, and they're very well received, which is why they're asked back. So we would expect positive results on that specific piece. Provide PD on the district's new assessment platform. So you heard a lot this evening about Renaissance is our primary platform. If you'll recall, this was, again, a budget piece using ESSER. We talked about it last year. We talk a lot these days about Renaissance. This is our primary platform to sort of progress monitor and to use data to drive instruction back into the classroom. It really drives our Tier 2 interventions. So, it's an additional platform, and teachers needed to receive a lot of PD. So again, we're going to do a survey that's not yet complete. But we did provide the PD to all of our staff. Around that, we provided the PD to administration because there's a different view, if you will, of the world from the administrative standpoint. And we're still working on that. All of our administrators received that, and myself included. Review of ALEKS and Freckle, and again, you heard of those this evening in this evening's presentations. Will show that an average students at grades 2 and up are using Freckle or ALEKS for an average of 45 to 60 minutes a week. So depending on how, you heard that ALEKS is more of a high school model, Freckle is more of an elementary model. So that intervention component is definitely going. You heard that this evening. The math coach takes that on and works directly with the teachers in sort of identifying. We're fortunate that we're small enough that we literally go through individual students and say, it looks like student X really could benefit from this, and customize that Freckle or ALEKS piece so that students can get what they need. That work will continue. That's never-ending work, quite frankly, that we would continue. And so our students are getting the 45 to 60. It's kind of grade level dependent. Review of ALEKS and Freckle data will each show that by the spring of 2023, in aggregate, WPS students have a growth rate above the 50th percentile against national norms. You saw some growth rates tonight, which is why they were in that presentation. We're pretty proud of the growth rates, and we think we set a pretty high target of the 50th percentile. Where we sort of think that 40th percentile is the break even, if you will. If you're at that 40th percentile, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but it says that you're at least, I guess a way to look at it, if you're in the 40th percentile of growth, in a year's time you've made a year's worth of growth. We set a 50 target because what we really need is more. A lot of our students need to catch up. So we talked tonight about meeting expectations, meeting expectations, approaching expectations, or not meeting expectations. The further down you go, we want more and more growth. We're really trying to close that gap. And that's the effort that we're putting forth.
Mr. Superintendent, on that one, you are measuring your success and the district's success in the complete aggregate?
Broken down by school.
All grades, all math and reading?
Correct.
Great, yep.
I mean, there's a limit to how far down Renaissance goes. I should rephrase a little bit. Renaissance, we sort of stop, we begin around grade 2.
All the grades that are tested.
So all the grades that are tested, and we only really go to grade 10. So if, thinking about high school, it gets a little bit different as you get into grades 11 and 12. Students take different types of courses, and, it's not really the standards become a little bit different in the way that we approach those, not just us, but anyone. So up through grade 10 really is where we stop with that. Let's see. And then last action step here is provide instructional supervision and evaluation that supports teachers to learn and ultimately meet instructional and pacing expectations. The measurable goal for that was or is by January, every teacher will have a minimum of 2 recorded brief observations, and the average teacher will have 5 by May 2023. This really comes down to myself and the building principals and getting in classrooms and providing effective feedback to our teachers. Ongoing process, frankly, have we met that for every single teacher? No, I can't say that we have at this point. But it is the target that we want to be able to get in there and give teachers written feedback, if you will, in our evaluative system. Again, that's an ongoing piece that happens all year, and we'll continue to work in that piece. For me, the most important piece is and I think you heard it tonight, that Ms. Diaz specifically, I know, was talking about it, and I think that Mrs. Rickson did as well. It's one thing to kind of put some things in a program and say, I saw you, great job, have a great day. It's a completely different piece to sit down with that teacher and say, I spent some time in your room today, and, can we talk about what I saw and what you're doing, and provide sort of that face-to-face feedback, and actually take more of a coaching approach, if you will, to try to help teachers move forward at the same time. And I think, I think that our principals are doing a really nice job of working with our classroom teachers to help improve practice, not just in math, which is what we're talking about here, but across the board, quite frankly. But in terms of this particular measurable goal, I don't need to go into a system right now to say that we have or have not done 2 for every single person. I'm sure we haven't gotten 2 for every single person documented and recorded. That's a pretty lofty goal. Let's see, the next strategic objective, number 4, relative to the implementation, is establish structures to support data-informed planning and tiered math instruction. Again, you heard a lot about that this evening. We kind of played this strategically, if you will, again this evening. You just heard data presentations, and our principals sort of talk to you a little bit about how they're using data to drive instruction. A big part of that is actually creating schedules that allow that to happen. I'm sure, as Mr. Murphy can appreciate, you can't make that happen unless you've got a schedule that allows us to look at data. And so that was really the first step way back in August. A part of that revolved around, we needed to hire some folks. And again, if you'll recall, we had a real elementary focus, K to 5. This is what this is about. And we hired some additional classroom teachers. We hired some additional allied artists, specifically music and art, so that each building could create a schedule that would support a model where we could actually sit down in an effective way, talk about data and what we need to do to move students forward. So the hiring and the master schedules, as you'll see there, were completed, obviously, back in August. We deployed a math coach to gather and synthesize math assessments. So each of the below assessments, and we have a list of all the assessments down below we'll get to in just a minute, but each of the assessments are administered on schedule. Our math coach does that. Some of these assessments you have to define at the beginning of the year. Some of these assessments, if they're nationally normed, you have windows and targets that you must hit. And so they're pretty tight, and so far, not only are we meeting those, but I think that what happens is our teachers see that data, and you saw tonight some really positive results, and what happens is teachers want more. And that's what we're beginning to experience, and it's really what we want, is for teachers to, sort of celebrate those little victories, and success begets success. So what we're seeing is we want more. Not only are we doing the progress monitoring that we promised, but in places and pockets, we're doing some additional progress monitoring that is supported through the Renaissance program so that we can look in between our 2 sessions. So we have, we had scheduled a beginning of the year, we have a winter and a spring. And then within those windows, you can do some additional progress monitoring. And, again, the teachers took on a lot. They took on a new math program, they took on a data platform, and so we tried not to overload. But there are teachers at this point that are requesting more information, like how can I do more? And so, of course, we're not keeping them from that. So we are meeting our schedules. It's ongoing. We're not finished yet, but so far we're meeting our schedules. The data is gathered and synthesized for CPTs. We have regular CPTs. You hear just about any time the principals are here. CPTs mean common planning time, and that's where we sit down. Those schedules allowed for that, to sit and go through data. It looks a little bit different in each building because each building, the students operate a little bit differently. High school is very different, as an example, from an elementary school. So the way we would look and review data is different. But those things are going on across the district regularly. I'm actually very happy to report that. It's sort of one of the first times that district-wide that we can really say that that's happening on a routine basis, and that in those meetings we're actually sitting and looking at data and talking about students and their successes and deficiencies and how to shore those up, and using data to do that. Math coach time, FaceTime with each grade level secured in building schedules. Again, our math coach is a part of those CPTs, so she has a schedule that allows her to be in buildings, across the week. She's usually in Especially, she was hired to be K to 5, and so she is very specifically in those buildings, those 2 buildings, every single day. Let's see. Implement VMath. You heard a little bit about VMath tonight, which is an intervention support with Renaissance, if you will, or with IM, I should say, excuse me. And it's in use by interventionists during TTE intervention. So I think you heard Ms. Diaz this evening mention VMath, and that is a program. It's a platform that students get very specific programming for their deficiencies to shore them up. So that's an intervention program that they use at Toy Town to bring students to speed and sort of close that gap. Definitely ongoing and definitely been implemented from early on. And VMath was something that was used at the middle school. It was something that Ms. Vizina had been using historically. Let's see. So there's a number of pieces here under E. Implement the new benchmarking assessment from Renaissance, which we've talked about. Standards-based assessments to progress monitor between benchmarks, which I just sort of briefly touched on. So we call them benchmarks. The benchmarks are the 3 times a year. Then we can progress monitor throughout to continue to make sure that our students are, not waiting from September until January to see if they're making progress. Let's make sure that they are along the way. Let's not just hope. We have a lot of sort of approaches to do that are provided by Renaissance, as well as the math program. We have what we call cool downs, also referred to as an exit ticket. Kind of edu-speak, if you will, but it's essentially, think of it as 2 or 3 questions at the end of a class period where we really focus on what was the meat of this particular lesson. Right? Did the students get it or not? I mean, that's the essence of teaching. We teach the students something, we let them practice that, and then we look at it and say, did they learn it? And if they didn't, then we need to go back. We don't just go tomorrow and turn the page, as somebody referenced tonight. We need to readdress that. We use exit tickets to do that, to sort of continue that iterative approach to make sure that our students are getting what they need. Ongoing, and again, our math coach does a lot of that work with the classroom teachers. Section checkpoint. So the math program itself has both section and unit assessments separate from Renaissance. So one of the really important pieces is that oftentimes a platform or a math platform, as an example, have their own assessments. And it's one thing to look at it and say that as we have an assessment that within that program, our students are really doing well with IM. But one of the things that that Renaissance helps provide us is sort of more of a triangulation to say, sure, the platform itself, we're doing really well on that platform assessment because it's designed to sort of support itself. And then you get to the end of the year and you find out, oh, wait a minute, against nationally normed standards and so on, not so good. But within our program, that was really great. It just didn't address everything. So one of the nice things about Renaissance and IM is that we're able to use all of those assessments to get to the same result. Is Renaissance saying that we're growing? Yes, but we're not doing well in IM or vice versa. We're seeing that we're growing in all those areas in the same way, which is very reassuring. I've had experiences in former districts where we adopted a particular program and wow, the kids were knocking it out of the park on that program with the program's own assessments. Turns out that wasn't so great. It didn't really correlate to real-world experience in terms of, maybe MCAS as an example. So we were trying to put things in place to make sure that not only was the program good, but it shored up against sort of a national norm, which is what Renaissance does for us. And then lastly, support from math coach and building principals utilize data from the above at CPTs to collaborative plan for reteaching extensions and Tier 2 instruction. So grade level CPT rolling agendas. So we have an agenda that you can see in Google Docs. We can always go back and look at what we discussed before and continue those conversations. But at any rate, we record those in our rolling agendas and follow-up instructional plans an average of 1 to 2 times per month. So we think we have whatever K to 5 classrooms. There's multiple teachers at each level, and our math coach is committed to being in each of those 1 to 2 times per month over the course of that time. So we're meeting that goal as well. So right now we have a few things we need to shore up, primarily the surveys to get feedback from our teachers. But right now we feel really good about where we are with the IM math implementation. as well as the Renaissance implementation, as you saw tonight, you've seen a few times over this school year. Questions about math before I hop over to ELA?
There is a ghost.
This happened, we were in here yesterday and the same thing happened.
The ghost. Or it's Matilda, one of the two.
So, moving on to District Priority 2, which was strengthening literacy instruction. You'll see some similar pieces, and then something, we made some sort of in-stream adjustments as well that I think are important to acknowledge relative to what we stated at the beginning of the year. So, Objective 1, relative to strengthening literacy instruction, as we presented early on, was to conduct a formal pre-K to 12 ELA/text/materials adoption process. And you see it right at the very beginning, not at this time. And so that sort of applies to all the way down this adoption process. And in working with a consultant and reflecting on our own district and where we are as a district, also reflecting on sort of some statewide deficiencies. You heard reference to something called SRSD multiple times today, which is a research-based writing program, one of the only research-based writing programs that are available. What we came to the conclusion that it's too early to adopt an ELA curriculum. That what we needed to do was back up. So we had these conversations that said, if we don't know our standards well enough at the grade level classroom, if we're not familiar with those standards well enough, and we're not delivering standards at a high level today, adopting a new curriculum is not going to solve that. You can adopt a new curriculum and still deliver the standards at a below grade level. So, because you know how to drive a Toyota doesn't mean you know how to drive a race car, basically, right? So I can put whatever you want in front of you, but you're still going to be delivering below target. So we backed up, and what we're doing is two things. If you also recall at the beginning of the year, we sort of discussed with MCAS statewide sort of things that were found from DESE, and one of the glaring components was writing. And we saw that in our own data, and I think we mentioned it early on. So we're doing two things. They were a bit of a change of course. One, backing up and doing a standards audit, which is to say, work with teachers to go through the existing grade level standards and compared to what is currently being delivered in student work. So in other words, let's bring our teachers up to understanding deeply grade level standards so that they're delivering those grade level standards in a rigorous way to our existing students. So we felt that there was no point in bringing in a new curriculum if we can't already deliver at a grade level. At which point, then we could move forward. So we kind of took literally a step backwards in the process and decided we weren't ready. And then along with that, we did decide we didn't have a writing program in this district. There's not a K-12 writing program. And so hearing all the writing deficiencies across the state, which we recognize in our own data and have probably recognized it historically, we did some research and found that really there's only one research-based writing program, and have adopted that K-12. So we're at different implementation sort of places within the district K-12. You heard that Mrs. Rickson talked today about having a professional development for her English teachers in it's called SRSD. We've done some other things earlier in the year with our elementaries, so we're at a little bit different places with that implementation, but we felt that it was really important to bring writing up to speed while we're also working most specifically K-5 with our sort of what we're calling a standards audit or standards review. So, you can see over here in my notes, it was really a change of direction. Instead of focusing on what we were doing, we needed to deeply understand and teaching to the standards, utilizing resources already at hand, as well as introduce a new writing program. So what we would see is we're going to push this adoption out by about a year. So we're going to allow the teachers to really deeply understand their standards, and once they do, we can really more intelligently adopt a curriculum. If you don't know the standards at a high level, then it's really difficult to look at new curriculum and evaluate it, was sort of the approach. So that's, to be quite frank, objective one, we completely changed direction. So there hasn't been anything. A PD has been for SRSD and bringing in a writing program.
Superintendent, you have shared with us the plan on ELA and making a shift, and I think the committee has supported that. At the same time, not speaking for the committee, but only speaking for myself, I will say that this remains a priority, I would say, for me, because that curriculum needs to be advanced to, 2023 or 2024. The question that comes up now, I think I heard for the first time pushing it for 1 year, which still makes sense. But the pushing it for 1 year means it's going to be in a different fiscal year. Is this ESSER that carries over to the fiscal? Okay, yeah.
We still have the funds for it. The other component to this is how much are we asking of teachers in this given time frame. We need to take a breath as well, and we have the money to do these things, but it also made a little bit of sense if you think, especially at Memorial, if you will, asking them to do IM and ELA at the same time. That's the same teacher. And so thinking that as a classroom teacher that's responsible for delivering both math and English, to say, hey, guess what? You just started math, and now you're going to also start English. It might be a little much. A number of factors involved in making that type of decision, but really we want our teachers to know our standards inside and out. Quite frankly, we're seeing the results of some of that work already, consulting work, where we're in reviewing student work, where we bring to CPT actual pieces of evidence of student work. We are already seeing and have heard from teachers, my God, this is amazing that our kids can do this. So really raising that bar of our expectations of students, which is a reflection of understanding more deeply what those standards are, will raise the bar to a degree. And I think the important piece to note is no matter what we adopt, we always need additional resources. So you've heard that we needed to bring in via math or Freckle or all these other pieces. Really when we talk about curriculum, it's just a resource, and you're always going to need to supplement. So what we're doing along the way is taking what we currently have and appropriately supplementing to bring that up to speed, if you will. So we're supplementing what we currently have to bring it as current as we can before we make the choice of what might be the most intelligent piece for the district moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Objective number 2, continue to support the implementation of evidence-based literacy instruction. So this is really more at the lower grade levels. As an example, so we've talked, I think you've maybe heard us talk about adopting ECRI. You've heard us talk about possibly Hill literacy. So what we found a couple of years ago, and I think Dr. Landman was a big proponent of adopting this, most specifically at K and 1 and maybe K through 2, is really adopting and moving towards a phonics-based program for teaching reading that really is the standard, and we hadn't done here in Winchendon. So a couple of years ago, we adopted and moved into moving to more of a phonics-based approach to reading, which is the standard. We, like I mentioned, that we weren't doing, and so we have, with that, we have used what I guess a consulting agency called Hill Literacy to help sort of drive that implementation. We still consult with them for our ECRI adoption, if you will. So that is used most specifically at 1 and 2 to see that phonics, and you'll see some data in a couple of weeks at Memorial, from the Memorial School in those grade levels that we're really seeing the fruits of those labors as well. So teachers will participate in coaching sessions provided by Hill Literacy to improve data-driven decisions and practices as measured by agenda minutes, data protocol work, and planning notes. Ongoing, we are meeting that expectation, and we'll continue to do that work. Master schedule, again, I mentioned that we would see some overlap here. Again, creating schedules that allow for that data work and reviewing that work. Of course, that applies to both math and ELA, the same schedule. But so those master schedules we did that back earlier in the year. And coach administrators FaceTime with each grade level secured and building schedules. So again, providing that time for administrators to work with their teachers, and there goes my battery. And look at that, data.
It said you're done.
I'm sorry? Yeah.
It said you're done.
I'm sorry? What do you got? This one. Thank you.
Ryan's always on the spot with this stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's where we were, yeah. So again, teachers working in those CPTs, very similar to math, using data to drive instruction and interventions. Ongoing. That's more principal-based and consultant-based than it is, as you remember, we have a math coach, but we don't have that necessarily on the ELA side. We have some literacy, literacy teachers, if you will, interventionists that are an integral component to some of that work. But in terms of having a separate coach, the way we have in math, we do not have that at this time in literacy, but we do use consultants, The Hill and some others, to bring in and do some of that work as well. Objective number 3, establish structures to support data-informed planning and tiered ELA. So again, this is very repetitive to math. Creating, again, funding the specialists, funding those positions. Just the same thing as math. We completed those, we hired the folks, we created the schedules. And then what you'll see here is a number on the left-hand side here. Over here on the left, the different types of data programs that we use. It's different because reading's reading's a different animal than math, if you will. So at the earlier grades, we use some different screeners. We use something called PAST, which is a phonics screener. So you sort of heard Mrs. Diaz tonight reference a couple of phonemes and some different things. Those are all phonics-based. So we use screeners to sort of find out where students are in that really early piece of reading, like down to just learning your letters, to what the letters sound like, and so on. That's not something that Renaissance does. Renaissance doesn't really kick in until around grade 2. And to be frank, when we created this, we knew that we needed to fine-tune how we use our different assessments at the different grade levels to kind of find out. So I think if you can remember back to Ms. Gilson being in here and some of her data early on, there was some real question, as I recall, from Mr. Vine about I'm a little confused about how, you know, there was a bar here for grade 2, but it was different over here. And so what she explained was it really depends on where you are in reading. If you're not a proficient reader yet at grade 2, if you're a proficient grader in grade 2, then we can put you on the Renaissance test. But if you're not a proficient reader, if you will, for a grade 2, then we have to use a different assessment. So sort of fine-tuning where those places lie. So that's why you see, you know, a number of different screeners here. We can't use just one, especially when you get down into those early literacy grades. So we use a phonics screener, and we also use something called DIBELS, which provides us with a lot of data relative as we're kind of moving through. It's a very standard screener that we use. Really, we've replaced at the kind of, I think, second and above, or above second, we've moved to using Renaissance instead of DIBELS, and we're now using DIBELS more at K to 2, depending on your reading level, and possibly the PALS, which is really, the PAST as a screener at really early phonics. So they all have a very specific location, and we're trying to be respectful of the specificity of that as opposed to just saying, just use this one for everything. Trying to be really specific to sort of unravel why, you know, where our kids are with reading. If we can't get that built from the beginning, then we're behind for the rest of their years in school. So we are implementing those across the board, and that is ongoing, as you've heard here tonight. So you will see when we come in with Memorial, you're not going to see as much about Renaissance. What you're going to see is DIBELS information, and that's reflective of the fact that students are at a different place and that, you know, different platforms are useful in different places. And again, the training administration and so on for Renaissance, you'll notice as well that, however, that DIBELS and some others are not in here for the training. It's because we've been using those already. So we didn't need to complete training for those, but we did need to complete training for Renaissance. We did that for everyone, some over the summer and into early September. Again, using gathering data, ELA assessment data, so that teachers can use it efficiently at common planning sessions to plan for tiered instruction. Again, I reference what the Tier 1 and Tier 2 are. It's ongoing and always in progress. Using the above data to plan for interventions as evidenced in CPT rolling agendas. So we can go in and look at these agendas for our CPTs as administrators at any time to see, are they doing that or not? And that's sort of the point of these rolling agendas. They're in Google Drive. So if at any time a principal wants to go in and see what's going on at CPTs that she may not be able to attend, we can see what that work looked like. It's a live document, if you will.
And you have all CPTs doing that?
Correct. Correct, across the grade levels, yeah. Again, a little different at the high school. High school doesn't have a CPT model per se. If you think about our classes at the high school, we really have one teacher that teaches, say, junior English or whatnot. So a CPT is usually a reflection of a group of teachers who teach the same thing and can look at data and sort of disaggregate it and talk about it in a meaningful way. High school and a little bit middle school, but mostly high school is a very different animal, and we can't really do it in that same way. They have CPTs, but I teach Algebra 1, you teach geometry, I teach whatever, and so we're really talking about maybe at a more theoretical level, what's lesson structure look like, how are we doing, maybe you can help me because you know geometry, that type of thing, but it's a different conversation. All right, that is that was District Priority 2. Which was relative, like I said, to strengthening literacy instruction. So although we've not gone and adopted a new ELA program, the priority was strengthening literacy instruction, and I feel very confident that we have strengthened what we're doing, and we're seeing that in the data as you saw tonight. District Priority 3 was around social emotional. And you've heard some of these presentations. Objective 1 was establish a relationship with outside vendor Care Solace, which I believe that Ms. Haru came in and gave a presentation on Care Solace. So again, some action steps and measurable goals, really training our staff was first. We did that back in September. That was completed to essentially present that to the community, which we've done, and you heard some very preliminary data about how much Care Solace was being used, so that, again, that was completed and communicated to parents early on. And then evaluate the program, which would not be until the end of the year, so we don't have anything on that at this time. But as we know, we've heard some things and we know it is being used. Objective 2 was more about, and there's only 2 objectives here, was really more about sort of direct support of teachers around social emotional. So integrate trauma-informed into the life and culture of our school. I believe that you've heard reference to a woman by the name of Jessica Minahan. We've referenced it a few times here. So Jessica Minahan is honestly a world-renowned BCBA. We are very fortunate to have her in our district as a consultant. She is here once a month to consult with our staff. And what we've sort of arrived at through consultation with her is sort of a case study type of model. So the way that we're really implementing that is that she will come in monthly and we sort of select a student, a difficult student in a particular class. She will go in and observe and then work with the teachers, work with our own BCBA, so on and so forth, to provide sort of a working model of what we could do with a given student. That's what we're currently doing with her. She comes every single month. Amazing feedback from anybody who really gets to interact with Dr. Minahan. We're really fortunate to have her. The pieces that have not happened yet are professional development to all staff on first day of school by Jessica Minahan. She actually, that was planned. However, she had something that came up and she had to travel to Europe on our first day of school and was not able to be here. I'm happy to report that she will be here next month. I believe it's the 10th. If I'm not mistaken, to deliver professional development to our entire faculty and a full-day PD. Although it was planned earlier in the year, even though it says our completion date here was March of '23, we really had hoped for that to kick off the year. It was just her schedule, being the person that she is, wasn't able to pull it off. But she will be here in a couple of weeks. Really excited to get her in front of our entire staff. And again, then, connected to that is educators communicate and enact positive common language and state expectations. So what we're looking for here with Dr. Minahan is, as it sort of states, is a common approach to working with dysregulated students. And so that as students matriculate through our district, as everything else we're trying to do, it's a vertical articulation, that students sort of know what to expect in a way as they move through, and they'll be treated, similarly from teachers K to 12, whether that has to do with math, language, ELA support, and or social emotional. So that's the effort as we move forward with Dr. Minahan. And as I said, she is here monthly as it stands today. She spends basically a full day once a month to support our schools, and been received very, very well. Very excited to have that. So those were our three district priorities and sort of the state of the union, if you will, relative to what we proposed to the committee that what we'd be doing this year.
Feedback, right, this is.
Yes.
Right, feedback. I've made some notes in my back, some thoughts. I've made some notes and I've got some thoughts. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on all the work that you have all done on the leadership team. And certainly congratulations to the staff on the focus that the energy that they've put into these to try and make them work. I know Rome wasn't built in a day, and so it's going to take some time, but I just wanted to say that I think that you've established a very strong vision and a direction, which is great, and I would say that that would be and exceeds expectations. You did a really good job of kind of pointing the right direction, pointing the ship in the right direction. I wanted to say that I think your budgeting has been outstanding in that finally we get reports where we can understand where the money is and where it's going and what the plan is for the budget. And I'm excited to hear, what kind of budget we're going to propose soon. But that's outstanding. And the ESSER monies, the use of the ESSER monies, as I go around the state in different schools and whatnot, and I hear, they're giving money back and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, wait, are you crazy? Because they don't know what to do with the money. Yeah. And you have made a great definition of what needs to be done, and those monies will be put towards those, so that's great. The work that you've done on curriculum, taking some risks, bringing some new programs in, the alignment of the reorganization plan that will better fit the state standards, all that stuff. And I think that's ongoing, so I'll give you kudos for that. Data-driven, everything you do is based on the data that you collect, and you collect a lot of data, so kudos for that. That's outstanding. The climate in the district, I think that's an ongoing one. I mean, you inherited a district that needed a booster shot, so to speak. And I think that you're providing that, and so that's ongoing. That's great. And I think the more success we have, the better the climate will be for students, parents, staff, everybody, your leadership team. And you're starting to show some benefits. But again, we can't expect that, in 1 year, things are going to completely turn around. So we'll give you some time for that. I think even just looking at this report tonight, the collaboration that you've shown has been exciting, and again, it continues to be ongoing, but you've involved stakeholders in many different areas and many different projects, and including hiring of principals, and now for your reorganization project, you've got committees all over, so I think that's great. I think you do a good job of collaborating with your stakeholders. And then the last one I wanted to address was communication. Again, I think you're putting some protocols into place for safety. Your reports on the busing issues, and that we get those emails, bus 5, bus B, or whatever it is.
Whatever it is,
Is
every
late
day.
today or something. But also, you keep us informed, and you keep I read your emails that are sent out to the community, and those are great things as well. Parent Square and those kinds of things are really good. Early notifications of changes. You've been very quick to let us know about issues that come up. I mean, we're kept in the loop, and that's great. Your presentations, as you have tonight, your presentations are very informative and educational, and bring clarity to what's going on. So I just want to say that's my feedback on this mid-year, on what you've been doing, and I'm very pleased that you are our superintendent, and I know that things are only going to get better because you're going to grow in the job more, and you're going to do some great things here. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. It's a humbling position, honestly. And I think what I'd like to one of the things that I think really needs to be acknowledged is I think a missing piece that we finally have secured, and I hope everybody comes to appreciate Ms. Babinski over time. She's really a find for us in a strange time, and so we're already seeing, or I'm already seeing. I'm grateful for your feedback around some of the things I've done on the budget, but that's the tip of the iceberg. I did well enough to kind of write things in terms of what we were doing financially, but I think she was a real missing piece that we needed, and I appreciate the support of this committee in the efforts to sort of continue to find the right person, and she's already shown her worth to me very quickly, and her knowledge and skill in what she's doing. And she's very, very humble about it, and that she has a long way to go, but I can tell you that where we are, we're way ahead of where we've been since I've been here from that position. And I think the other piece that makes us strong, if you will, as a central office team, and I was talking to Dr. Lamnon about this today, is I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by a team who's willing to say, I don't think that's right. I mean, it's a really important piece, and it's not just central office, it's our principals, our union president, who are, we're all willing to tell each other that what you're saying or what you're doing might be wrong. We're not filled with a bunch of people that are just trying to prop somebody else up, and me specifically. And Dr. Lammer and I were talking that today, that one of the things that I think that makes us really strong in the way that we're sort of going forward is that we can have productive conversations and not all be in agreement and be willing to say it, and know that it's all for the benefit of our district.
Well,
to move
and
forward,
that's the
so.
climate that you've created with your leadership. You've made it a place where people are allowed to make conversation, and sometimes critical conversation, a part of your meetings and whatnot, and part of the job, which is that's what it should be. That you have when your ILT feels comfortable enough to come to meetings and share maybe not so good news, maybe to be critical of the direction and whatnot, and they feel comfortable doing it, and they feel safe doing it, then you've created the right climate for change. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
one of the most important things that we do is evaluating the superintendent. And so getting this information in an informative way helps us to evaluate you. And that will take center stage at the end of the year when we come to the formal evaluation. So not only because Larry said all kinds of wonderful things, but also for the purpose of making it through tonight, because it is 8:45. I'm not going to repeat anything he said, but generally agree. Couple things, student outcomes. So we heard some good data today. There was some good progress. We heard lots of information about positive growth, but that remains, right, an issue that this district has to continue to chip away at. We know that that's a focus of yours and of the administration and teachers, but we've got a ways to go. And the other thing I'll say that only other thing I would add to Larry's comments is I am very glad that the district improvement plan remains at the core of some of the things that you are doing. Your plans within the schools and your plans with Jonathan and others that are implementing different aspects of mathematics curriculum or otherwise are tied to that district plan, and you are continuing to work towards those major strategies that I think you think are important, and certainly your school committee does too. So, well done.
Thank you.
Don't have much to add to that. I mean, I do think that the one thing that I did miss seeing on this was that we did have a fourth goal as an overall goal, which was a communication goal, and that was missing from this. So I think I definitely want us to figure out a way to move forward with that. And, you know, Alicia and I need to get our acts together, to get together, to communicate, to get the communication committee going.
It's a fair way to say it.
Yes, we do. But that was one of our goals at the beginning of the year, that we did make a priority for the district and for you. So I would like to see that focused on. So I was a bit disappointed not to see that on here. But other than that, I think that, you have done a very good job. I mean, there have been some things, you and I aren't strangers. We aren't shy with each other. I've told you when, I was disappointed with something, or when I think you're doing awesome. And, most of the time I tell you that I think you're doing a great job. So, whether we're in this meeting or whether we're, just crossing at Matilda or, at the school, that I tell you, we talk. So,
I appreciate your frankness.
right, and I mean, that's the whole thing, I don't want anybody to think that, I'm here. My job is to hold you accountable and to hold, myself and us accountable. And that's what I take very seriously here. Did you kill his computer too?
Nope.
No. I think he feels very naked without his computer.
I'm about to give that back.
But I think that I do think that you've done a good job. I do think that my major concerns are, and I will reiterate the same one that I brought up during the whole discussion of our reorganization plan, and I kind of saw it a little bit in the data that we saw, as much as, reading is looks like it's getting better through the data, but my biggest concern is that we make sure that no matter what we do with the reorganization of this district, that we make sure that we don't just focus on the youngest children, as much as they may be the incoming students. I want to make sure that we're hanging on to students throughout throughout 12th grade, because what I'd like to see is, that we keep them.
No question. And, maybe it should just continually be stated that, one of our initiatives, and Mr. Murphy will remember when I came here, that, my very first couple of things was, one, to create programming at that time, at the secondary level, that A, keeps our students, and then B, hopefully starts sort of in a way recruiting students. And it's crucial to what we do. Although it's not a part of, our specific plan, I will say that it never goes unforgotten, specifically that secondary level. And I think as we, even look at some of the things we've done with Murdoch Trust money and Murdoch Trust and Robinson Broadhurst, and thinking about those enrichment activities and things that we're doing is, a lot of that is directed at the secondary level to think about, enrichment programming. And, some of the things that we, originally established were targeted at that, and they're not forgotten. And so we will continue those efforts at that secondary level, and you'll see some things this year in the spring, if you will, that I think part of that solution is simply talking about the great things that we do to our own parents, right? That the 7th and 8th grade parents, and the chair and I have had this conversation already, and I've talked to Mrs. Rickson that we're going to do a better job this year as an example of actually celebrating the things that we do at the high school that I think historically we assume families know about just because they're in that same building and, hey, you're here. They don't, right? So, whether it's our sort of audio-visual programming that Mr. Collins does and that, our weekly piece, that's a huge component and a huge draw that many students are interested in. And that's just one thing, whether it's the dual enrollment, whether it's our freshman academy. Like, there's a long list of things that we're not really good at sort of informing our own families about, that, hey, you don't know about this, and there's a really good reason that you should stick around, right? So whether it's our arts program, whether it's building out the band, which we didn't put in here, that was a piece that we were really fortunate to get with Murdoch Trust. But, we're establishing a relationship with the Groton Hill Music Center, at the elementary level. But that's going to give us an ability to support the high school piece, where we're going to be able to have a band program, because it's going to start at the elementary level. And we're building that high school piece, but it's going to fail if we don't support it at the bottom end, right? So there's a lot of things we're doing, I think, at that secondary level that we're not good at telling our own people about, to give them a reason to stay. So I think you're going to see that come spring, and we'll certainly celebrate that here. Thank you for bringing it up.
I do think that's, that's the one thing that I think we need to do. And that's not on you, that's on all of us.
It's all of us. I agree. Thank you
Right.
for saying that.
So I agree. Like I said, I agree with most of what was said. I just think that we can all do a better job at telling our district's story.
We always can.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the members. Any other comments before we? Okay. All right. That puts us, I don't know what time it is now. Oh, it's almost 9 o'clock, but we
It's
are at
nap
item
time.
8. And we're going to make it through at least item 8.
Item what?
This is the
What item are we on?
subcommittee reports, item 8A. And the first item is the Joint Committee on Cost Revenue Sharing. I believe the folks that were in attendance for that were
Thank you.
Member Vine,
And
Alicia, and the superintendent. Is that right? Would you be able to provide an update on how that went? Yeah, okay, thanks.
We've had a couple of meetings with this working group, I think, is what the town, so to be clear as well, we are on that Dr. Forsythe just mentioned. The other members are two members from the Board of Selectmen and one member from FinCom, as well as the town manager. So we have begun to open conversations, to be frank. At the very first meeting, and I believe we've had 3, but the third one, we actually had our senator and reps were here yesterday and had a really great conversation as they were here for the CAC and the Sunshine Cafe. I want to say it right. We were fortunate to have them in attendance. But what we've really started to talk about first off is, there's a lot of conversation around Chapter 70 and net school spending, and we're going to have another year where you're going to see that the school budget is very high and probably outweighs the town side, and what that means for the town contribution. So there's a lot of conversation about that and how it relates to how the town would like to, how we as a community should fund education. So we currently fund right at 100% of net school spending. So for all intents and purposes, that means what the state says the town should contribute, we contribute, but not really anymore. And we're right at that threshold. So the conversation right now is around, we should probably settle on a percentage over net school spending. The average across the state is that the average for communities is around 120% of net school spending. And we're not certainly targeting an extra 20% above net school spending, but we should target something, and how do we create a plan to get there? maybe not necessarily directly talking about solar and the override, but if the target is to get to 105% of net school spending, where that 5% comes from to the schools is not really that important. What's important is the 5%. Whether that comes from solar, override, that's really in the town manager's hands. But let's stop bickering over that, if you will, and just talk about where do we want to be as a community, and how does that talk about how we value education, right? So that's piece one that we've been speaking on, and there's a lot of talk about the Chapter 70 sort of formula right now. The second piece that we're currently talking about and trying to come to an agreement on is how to possibly share a new, our facilities director is retiring, and sort of, is there a model where we can share someone, across the town and schools to maybe better serve our community as a whole and reduce costs on both sides, sort of some shared costs, some shared costs in that example. So one example that has come up that's just sort of an easy one would be, between us, we probably have 9 lawnmowers. We may not need 9 lawnmowers between us if we were working together. So really talking about efficiencies and trying to figure out if using a common person would allow for efficiencies that outweigh maybe the costs on both sides. And an example that I recently gave was, if you'll recall, when we did the Toy Town work to bring up to spec the air circulation, we didn't have a person that could really dedicate their time to overseeing that project. Our facilities director is knee-deep or waist-deep or more in day-to-day facilities work. And I know Mr. Murphy is well aware of, it's great to call it a manager, but they're actually in there doing the work and not a lot of time to do the management. So, we spent probably an extra $40,000 to $50,000 to sort of oversee that project. And so, although there's not a real cost necessarily associated with our cost savings, there are examples of projects where we don't really have the capacity at this point to do that. So those are the types of things we're putting forward as suggestions for this committee to sort of come to some type of agreement. Yesterday, Rep. Zlotnick spoke very eloquently on the SOA and sort of that model and how it's also impacting towns, because as we're very appreciative as a school committee that we're receiving a lot more funds. The piece that sort of goes a little bit unseen on our side of the table is that the local contribution is increasing. So, which means that's digging into the town side budget because they're not funding at the same level. It's an overall increase. And so I think last year the town contribution was up by at least $250,000 and might be the same amount this year. So that means he's got to cut his budget. So talking about how all that, that's not in our control, it's not in the town manager's control, but Representative Zlotnick was very articulate about how he's really advocating for all the small communities are hit that same way. So it was really nice to have him here and talk to that for both sides of the table, if you will, to help us understand and hopefully articulate that out to the community a little bit better. That's where that's at.
Questions for the, what are we on, Joint Committee for Cost Revenue Sharing?
Yep, done.
My eyes uncrossed.
Only comment I would have, and this is something we're gonna have to work on together as a committee and that subgroup, is the conversation has started in this group about what our net school spending floor should be. And that, of course, our net school spending floor right now is 100% of what's required by the state. We sometimes are at 101, we are sometimes at 99, but that's how the funding sort of plays out over the course of the fiscal year. What the superintendent just shared is that there's the idea that's been proposed to set a floor that's above 100. That it's 103%, it's 105%. And we would need to likely drive that conversation because that will most certainly have an effect on lots of different things, most notably the town's contribution.
Well, if you, Mr. Chair, if I may, if you look at school districts around the state, we may be at 101 or 103, but the average, and I haven't looked at it the last couple of years because of COVID and whatnot, and that's kind of been different. But before COVID, the average was 112 across the state.
We think it's 120 now.
Yeah, could be 120.
That's what Mr. Kane has brought
And
forward.
so we
anyway.
were, and when you looked at the districts that were in the lowest performance, they were the ones that were under the 112, percent, and we were part of that. So, and around us, I think Oakmont, Ash West was the only one that reached that 112. I don't think Narragansett did, or
Oakmont is at 118, and Narragansett is at 110.
110. Okay, so a few years ago, they were 107, so they've gone up to 110. Where are we now?
Us?
Yeah,
We're at 100, and I think what we see in other districts is,
we were at 101.7.
well, it's an accident.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that we base our budget on the cherry sheet when it very first comes out. And if
Yeah.
that money moves, we sort of, usually stay there. But then if it gets funded higher, then the town has to fund higher. But we didn't plan for that. And I think the conversation is we need to actually have a plan.
Yeah.
What you're describing are towns who have a plan, because that number is dead on every single year. And the risk of not having a plan that I think Dr. Forsythe just referenced, sometimes we're at 99%. Because that cherry sheet moves after our budget's been approved. The problem with that is the town gets penalized the following year. So they have to fund fully at 100% the following year, but then
Right.
they also have to supply what they missed the year prior. So if that was $250,000, then they're beholden to provide that. And so by having a plan in place, maybe we can at least, the oopses don't come along. And we've had a few of those where the town gets penalized. And so I think having a plan in place is really the thing to do. And it doesn't have to be 110, but let's at least have a plan so that we can make progress, is the discussion.
I think it would be fair to say, and I'll look to the members to confirm, that we, seeing as our two representatives to that group aren't here, that we would agree that continuing that conversation about setting a plan and whatever that percentage ends up being would be supported by the school committee. Agreed?
Yeah,
Ghost agrees too.
Say again.
The ghost agrees too.
All right, calendar committee, I think this is Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I think we've got the calendar ready to go, but almost ready to go. It needs a little bit.
Mr. Murphy?
Make a motion tonight. So, yeah, the calendar is almost ready to go. I would not make a motion to accept it tonight. Maybe at our next meeting, we should be ready. Yes, we will be ready. Not, yes, we'll be ready for the next one. Because it's pretty much, it's done, and the conversations have been had about, some of the days and whatnot, and trying to even them all out in each quarter, and all those kinds of conversations have already been held. And the last draft I got looked pretty good. So I think maybe one more meeting and we should be able to nail it.
Questions? Do we have any other subcommittee updates? Quick update from the policy subcommittee. The policy subcommittee will be meeting on March 17th at 2 p.m. at Town Hall. That will come out in an official notice when the superintendent's office is ready to release that. But that will be our next subcommittee meeting for policy.
On St. Patrick's Day.
Early enough. And the other update that Member Vine left with us before he had to depart was from the capital planning subcommittee. The capital planning subcommittee has been doing work on all of the capital needs for the town. And in a recent agreement of that subcommittee, committee, the parking lot repair or parking lot renovation for the high school and middle school was included along with other items in a 5-year plan. So that is progress. For that, that is no guarantee that the project is going to happen in a certain period of time, but it is definitely progress on behalf of one of the most, one of the important large capital projects for the school district. And I think that's it we have for subcommittees, so that brings us to new business, and we are at 9C, the MASC conference update.
Mr. Chair, for the sake of all of us, may I move that we table this to the March 16th meeting only because I will not be here on March 2nd, so therefore will not be able to give it at that time. Go
God
ahead,
bless you.
Larry. Second it, second it.
Yeah, I will second that motion.
Any discussion?
No.
Karen?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye, aye.
Yeah, the chair certainly votes aye, and that is tabled until March 16th. Thank you. That brings us to old business. I don't think we have any. Any old business to bring before the committee? All right, not hearing any. Future agenda items, we have the ELA curriculum adoption.
We'll still provide it. I think we need to have an update, a more in-depth update from Dr. Lehman than what I provided tonight, where he can spend some real time going through it, than sort of my cursory overview.
Okay. And another budget overview coming up at the next meeting, March 2nd.
The FY24 budget, yes.
Other
We're
future
adding
agenda items?
the mask update to the March 16th. And can we have it earlier in the agenda, possibly?
Yep.
So hopefully we have people here and awake.
Other updates?
I have it all set for you.
Other agenda items from me, Mr. Superintendent, would be the calendar subcommittee needs to be on if we're going to vote the calendar in next time. Data presentations, I think we're going to be doing the data presentations from the other two schools, either March 2nd or March 16th, I assume. Yep. Only other topics that I would ask the committee to consider is possibly inviting in maybe Officer Flag or others to update us on security generally. Lots and lots going on nationwide, hoax calls and all of that. It might be the right time for the town and us to hear from the officer. And I don't know if this is an agenda item or whether this is just a supply of data, perhaps from the superintendent's office, but I'd like to understand better, especially from our school's perspective, what the federal complaint about vocational and technical admission standards for the Voc Tech schools means for us. Of course, this is only a complaint right now. What I don't understand is whether or not that's for the 23-24 school year that a change could be made, in which case, if Monty Tech, for instance, is forced to admit students in a different way, that would have significant immediate effects on the students that are in our district.
You mean if
Well, they
they're,
have to change the legislation.
Karen?
do you mean the legislative change to do it via more like an exam school
So
in
there's a
Boston?
federal
Like a lottery?
Sorry, I thought you were done. Go on.
Like a lottery, you mean?
So there's a federal complaint
Mhm.
that has been filed against the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, arguing that the way in which students are admitted to most vocational technical institutions, public institutions in Massachusetts, is inequitable, and that it disadvantages certain students from lots of different backgrounds. It's only a complaint. So how that acts or how that affects the admission standards is up to the DESE, and whether or not the DESE takes action to force institutions to change to potentially avoid the complaint going any further. Whether that looks like an exam or a lottery or selective admission, that's to be determined. But we need to understand, what I don't understand is what that means for our district. What that means for Winchendon when it comes to selective admission it can't be next year, because Monty Tech's already admitting students for next year. I assume it can only be for out years.
I think until the complaint is until it's acted on. I mean, I know that MASC actually has asked the legislature to act on to put in place for Mask is putting together something to ask that the legislature, I'm sorry, I can't talk anymore, work to make it more equitable for vocational and technical entries because of the fact that it has been inequitable
Is that since the complaint or before the complaint?
before the complaint.
Can you find that and send that to us?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that.
You know, I'm the liaison to Monty Tech, so I can, I'll make a trip down there, talk with people at Monty Tech and see what their take is on it, and if they're, in their mind, there is a timeline for change.
Well, and the
They-
technical schools themselves have the authority, have the autonomy to change their local processes. There are voc tech schools already in Massachusetts doing pure lottery by their own decision. So it would be good to know if Monty Tech is considering that as the one that serves our district.
We could invite our rep.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have one, do we?
Yeah, we do.
I think Tamara's still the rep.
Ms. Cassidy.
She is?
Yep.
All right,
I missed
any
it.
other future, we kind of went into discussion there. Any future agenda items that haven't been mentioned yet? Okay, folks, we're at closing member comments. Asking for brevity here.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion on the floor.
I do have one closing comment. I would like,
Hold on one moment.
sorry.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second to adjourn? We have a second to
Before we
adjourn?
do, yes, I second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Is there any discussion?
Yes. I would just like to make one comment that,
Member Cast, we're only discussion on the motion.
oh, no.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
The chair votes no for the interest of doing closing comments, but the motion passes, and we are adjourned.